우리들이 살아갈 미래를 위해 푸른 숲을 키우고 깨끗한 에너지를 사용하고 바다랑 하늘을 맑게 만든대요. 우와! 누가요? KB가요.
금융을 통해 더 나은 세상을 만들어가는 KB가 저탄소 녹색 산업을 지원합니다. 미세먼지 발원지에 생겨난 숲도, 청정한 신재생 에너지도, 친환경 금융 상품도, KB는 국민과 함께 아름다운 환경을 지켜가고 지속가능한 사회를 만들어 나갈 수 있도록 묵묵히 그리고 진심을 담은 ESG 금융으로 세상을 바꾸어갑니다.
우리 모두가 함께 그려가는 내일.
KB 그린웨이브 2030.
Korea Best Eco-Friendly Financial Group. KB Financial Group.
바다를 바라보면 정말 아름답고 파랗고 너무 좋거든요. 근데 이제 시선을 뒤로 돌려서 잘 살펴보면 바위 속에 정말 많은 플라스틱 페트병 쓰레기들이 있어요. 물고기들이 이렇게 바닷속에 떠다니는 페트병을 먹이로 착각해서 뜯어먹은 흔적을 되게 많이 봐요. 근데 결국은 그 물고기들이 또 우리 식탁에 올라온다고 생각하니까 또 되게 가슴이 아프죠. 폐 플라스틱을 이용해 원사를 만들어서 의류를 제조하는 브랜드가 나왔다고 해서 되게 반가웠어요. 완벽한 삶을 사는 사람은 없다고 생각하거든요. 자기 자리에서 그냥 할 수 있는 노력들을 하다 보면 좀 더 깨끗한 환경을 만들 수 있지 않을까 생각해요.
우리는 왜 행복할까요? 다 마신 페트병을 다시 깨끗하게 만들어 재탄생시키기 때문이죠. 제품의 생산, 유통, 판매, 회수까지. 제주개발공사와 함께 우리의 지구를 지켜요.
마을 사람들이 축제를 열어줄 때가 있어요. 이들이 첫 해에 우리를 이렇게 만났던 반응과 몇 해가 지나고 나서 우리와 함께 이렇게 어울리는 그 분위기가 너무 달라요. 그 분위기는 그러니까 우리가 함께 이걸 이뤄냈어. 사실 이 나라 언어는 전혀 우리가 이해할 수 없는 언어고 문화도 정말 다른 문화인 거고, 근데 서로 그걸 느끼는 거죠. 우리가 함께 이걸 만들어냈구나. 커피라고 다 똑같은 커피가 아니더라고요. 그러니까 정말 어떻게 컨트롤하느냐에 따라서 커피 맛이 엄청나게 크게 좌지우지되고 가격이 엄청나게 변동이 되더라고요. 똑같은 1kg의 커피를 사더라도 더 고가로 팔 수 있는 커피를 사는 게 낫지, 한국 갖고 와가지고 팔아봤는데 사람들이 맛없다고 다시 안 찾는 그런 커피를 사올 필요는 없는 거잖아요. 근데 그거를 이제 좋은 의도로 농장에 적용을 해보자면은, 농장에서 이왕이면은 커피나무 관리를 잘 해서 좋은 퀄리티의 커피를 생산만 해준다면 우리는 얼마든지 한국에서 잘 팔 수 있는데, 이게 이제 가장 기본적인 생각이었던 거예요. 우리가 실행하는 사업 지역들에 가보면 길가에 각 국가별로 해당 마을을 도와줬다는 표지판들이 엄청 많이 꽂혀 있어요. 모르겠어요. 마을 자체가 아주 막 잘 사는 것 같지는 않아. 여전히 엄청나게 무너져 있고, 그래서 저 돈들은 다 어디로 갔나? 약간 이런 생각이 들 때도 있어요. 가장 경쟁력 있고 실력 있는 로컬 파트너를 찾아서 그들이 가장 잘 알고 있는 마을 사람들과 함께 협업하도록 하고, 우리는 거기에서 나온 최고의 결과물, 제일 맛있는 커피를 한국에 있는 소비자들한테 판매를 해서 수익을 얻고, 그걸 다시 돌아가서 농장에 재투자하고. 사실 가장 중요한 서클은 우리만 있는 게 아니고 트리플래닛, 농장, 농부들, 그 다음에 현지에서 항상 함께하는 파트너들이 있어요. 전문가 파트너들. 이런 구조들이 있다 보니까 서스테너블한 구조가 만들 수가 있는 거죠. 그늘나무를 심으면 커피가 더 맛있다, 이런 정도만 알고 있었는데, 에티오피아에 가보니까 그늘나무 수준이 아니고 완전 그냥 정글이에요, 정글. 그러니까 커피나무가 안 보여요. 그리고 거기에 있는 커피가 세계에서 최고로 비싸고 제일 맛있는 커피라고. 농장을 만들더라도 그늘나무를 한 그루라도 더 심어가지고 숲처럼 보이게 하자. 커피나무 숲, 커피 포레스트를 만드는 게 우리의 목표인 거예요. 더 많은 커피 포레스트가 만들어질수록 자연보호가 훨씬 더 많이 되겠죠. 트리플래닛한테 해외 농장 사업을 개척하는 거는 그들한테도 큰 도움이 되지만, 우리가 미션을 계속 유지하고 사업을 수행하는 데에도 되게 큰 가치가 돼요. 이렇게 아름다운 숲을 이렇게 행복하고 멋진 사람들과 만들어 갈 수 있구나라는 게 우리한테도 진짜 큰 행복이 되는 거죠. 이 친구들한테 나 저번에 왔지? 나 또 왔어. 다음에 또 올 거야. 하면서 어떻게 보면은 뭐랄까, 그 후견인 같은 그런 모티베이션을 좀 줬으면 좋겠다는 생각이 있었어요. 그러니까 좀 더 퍼스널하게 그 형 또 왔네? 약간 이런 느낌으로. 메이크업팜은 어떻게 보면은 서로 행복하기 위해서 만들어가는 사업이니까 농부들이나 우리나.
Loving our neighbors, respecting life, and making life sustainable. LOHAS. There is a company dedicated to practicing the values of LOHAS. I will only do business that serves the people and the planet. The LOHAS values of Pumuan is committed to the sustainability of our health and the planet. Pumuan will continue to innovate while practicing the principles of LOHAS. Our products and menus are made with less carbs, balanced nutrition, and world-class technology. Our consumers are enjoying vegetables and plant-based protein that are not only healthy, but delicious. We have high-tech farming operations that focus on the well-being of animals. Our effort is to maximize the use of raw, plant-based materials to respect and preserve the well-being of animals and develop products that help us live a healthier, more sustainable lifestyle. We instill the values of LOHAS in our daily lives so that people can be happy and live confidently. With every innovation, we will continue to keep our Earth in mind. Thanks to Pumuan Institute of Technology and the principles of LOHAS, we are able to constantly innovate our positioning. Our technical institute is the first South Korean food R&D organization to get LEED Gold, a global certificate for eco-friendly buildings, a token of recognition highlighting the values and sustainability of LOHAS. Pumuan will continue to model the LOHAS principles, shaping the world of today and the future.
승객 여러분, 페트병, 사탕수수, 유채꽃은 아이오닉5가 될 수 있습니다. 이제 지속가능한 미래로 출발합니다. Welcome on board, Ionic 5.
첫 주인에게 버림받던 날, 난 그리 슬프지 않았어. 버려질 수밖에 없는 나는 플라스틱 페트병이었으니까. 난 사랑받을 운명이 아니었어. 어쩌다 운 좋게 재활용 원단이 될 기회를 얻었지만 다 헛된 희망이었지. 선택받지 못해 또다시 창고에 버려졌거든. 그렇게 체념한 채 소각장의 갈라를 기다리는데 말이야, 이상하게 이런 마음이 생기더라. 누군가의 옷이 되어 사랑받는 기분, 한 번쯤 꼭 느껴보고 싶다고. 이런 날 네가 구원해줬지만 가끔은 불안한 마음이 들어. 유행이 지났다는 이유로 다시 버려지게 될지 모르니까. 너에게 부탁 하나 해도 될까? 너와의 행복이 계속될 수 있도록 나를 오래오래 입어줘. 지구를 사랑하는 당신에게, 당신을 사랑하는 옷으로부터. 리 텍스타일 by WWF.
내가 눈을 들면 보이는 것들,
햇살 거울처럼 우리를 닮아 회색빛이 될지도 몰라. We can, we can, we can. 나를 숨쉬게 한 이 땅을 위해 내가 해준 일은 있을까. 우릴 꿈꾸게 한 별들과 저 바다를 위해 We have to change it now. We can, we can, we can. Paint the world in green, far as we can see. 마음을 모아, 두 손을 모아. 이제 우리가 필요한 것. And give your love back to the earth. 나 혼자 손잡을 지 몰라도 우리 함께라면 we can change. 온 세상에 펼쳐지는 사랑 우리를 보여줘야 해. You're the hero I've been looking for. We can, we can, we can. And we're stopping right about this. And we're stopping right and give your love back to the earth. Yeah, 우리 함께라면 we can change. 온 세상에 펼쳐질 그 사랑 우리를 돌려줘야 해. You're the hero I've been looking for. We can, we can, we can. We can, we can, we can. Yeah, we're the hero. Yeah, we're the hero. We can, you.
제2차 P4G 정상회의를 서울에서 개최합니다. 국제사회와 함께 탄소중립 실현에 앞장서겠습니다.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the 2021 P4G Seoul Summit Thematic Water Session. My name is Kyungmi Kim, the MC for this session. As you know, P4G, Partnering for Green Growth and Global Goals 2030, is a cooperative platform in which both public and private sectors, as well as civil society, participate together. Also, it is a global consultative group to cope with climate change and achieve sustainable development goals. P4G consists of 5 themes that are closely related to climate change response. Now, at this time, there is a session on water that is most closely related to our human lives and at the heart of all global ecosystems. Under the theme of carbon neutral smart water management for climate resilience, the thematic water session will be a venue for sharing and discussion to realize carbon neutrality in response to climate crisis with the speakers. And I inform you that all sessions are broadcast through the official website of P4G and YouTube. And throughout whole sessions, simultaneous interpretation will be provided in 2 languages, Korean and English. For today's session, we have prepared 2 parts of panel discussions. First part of the session will be organized by the Ministry of Environment of Republic of Korea, and the second part will be organized by the P4G Hub. I am really looking forward to what topics and discussions will be going to be. And I think many viewers watching this session through the P4G official website and YouTube feel the same way as I do. Now, let's officially begin 2021 P4G Seoul Summit Thematic Water Session. First, I would like to invite Ms. 정혜한, the Minister of Environment, Republic of Korea. So please welcome the Minister.
반갑습니다. 대한민국 환경부 장관 한정혜입니다. 오늘 환경부가 주최하는 P4G 물 세션에 온오프라인으로 함께해 주신 시그리드 카그 네덜란드 통상개발협력부 장관님, 허재영 국가물관리위원회 위원장님, 안드리 스나이르 마그나손 작가님, 차상균 서울대학교 데이터 사이언스 대학원 원장님을 비롯한 모든 패널분들과 참석자 여러분들을 진심으로 환영합니다. 기후변화 대응과 지속가능한 발전을 위한 공공과 민간 간의 파트너십을 확산하는 이 자리에 특별히 오늘은 기후위기에 따른 물 문제를 극복하기 위한 스마트한 해결책을 논의하기 위해 모였습니다. 최근 우리 인류는 홍수, 가뭄, 산불 등 기후변화로 인한 다양한 자연재해에 직면해 있고 이 중 홍수, 가뭄 등 물과 관련한 재해가 가장 큰 비중을 차지하고 있었습니다. 녹색 성장과 글로벌 아젠다 2030을 위한 P4G의 5대 주제 중 물은 나머지 4 분야의 기초가 되는 요소란 점을 고려할 때 기후위기 극복을 위한 탄소중립 스마트 물관리를 주제로 한 이번 물 세션의 논의는 매우 중요하다고 할 수 있습니다. 오늘 토론을 통해서 물 문제 극복을 위한 스마트 혁신의 중요성을 인식하게 되고 또한 기술 개발을 위한 노력과 투자를 확대하는 한편 보다 통합적인 물관리 정책 개발이 촉진되기를 기대합니다. 이와 함께 물을 둘러싼 국가들과 이해 당사자들 간의 거버넌스의 필요성 그리고 중요성에 대해서도 인식을 확대하고 창의적인 파트너십이 논의되는 계기가 되기를 바랍니다. 이번 세션의 결과로 선언할 기후위기 극복을 위한 탄소중립 물관리 솔루션이라는 실행 촉구문을 통해서 탄소중립 시대에 나부터 바로 지금부터 모든 사람들이 함께 맑고 깨끗한 물을 누릴 수 있는 기술, 정책, 거버넌스의 굳건한 주춧돌이 되기를 희망합니다. 고맙습니다.
Thank you, Ms. Minister, for your warm speech. I think many people will be happy to see him. Next, I'll introduce Mr. Andreas Magnussen. He's familiar with us as the author of the bestseller on time and water. And he also works as an environmentalist. And Mr. Andreas Magnussen will deliver the inspirational speech, titled Valuing Sustainable Water Management from Now On. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome him.
When will you be 94? And hopefully you'll be as energetic as Grandma Hulda is now. Maybe you'll even be living in this same house. And maybe your 10-year-old great-granddaughter will be visiting, sitting with you in this kitchen in 2102, just like you are sitting here now. When will your great-granddaughter be 94 years old? Your grandma taught you, you will teach your great-granddaughter. You can have a direct impact on the future right up to the year 2186. Imagine that. Hello, my name is Andris Nær Magnusson. I'm talking from Iceland. And it's a great honor to speak to you here from distance. My lecture is about time and water, because in the next 100 years, we expect all the elements of water on our planet to go out of balance. We believe that glaciers will melt and the ocean will rise and the pH of the oceans will reach a level not seen for 50 million years. While patterns of rain and snow and drought and clouds and storms will also become different than we have seen before. The idea is that the issue is so large that it's in a way larger than language. I can't say that the issue is enormous to the 12th degree, and if I would scream at you the data or the information, you would not invite me for another lecture. So how do you talk about something that is bigger than language? And the idea is that this issue is so big that it's a bit like a black hole in space. A scientist can't really see a black hole because it sucks in all light. And in the same way, the issue is so big that language cannot really grasp it. To see a black hole, you have to look around it, look at the periphery, and to understand this issue, sometimes instead of looking at graphs and data, you have to look around the issue to find a connection to the heart from the brain. One of the issues is, of course, about time, because this is about something happening in the next 100 years, and how do we relate to time, and how time shapes us, and how we shape time. I was once working in a manuscript institute, and I had this manuscript in my hands. This is one of the oldest manuscripts in Icelandic history, and it's the original copy of Nordic mythology, where the information about Thor, Odin, Valhalla, the Nordic gods, is preserved. And here they have wisdom that says, your family will die, you will die, but the good reputation will never die. So I started gathering information about my family, my ancestors, my grandfather, interviewing, because something that was normal 100 years ago has become special for me and will be totally unique or maybe alien for my children. So I thought, if I preserve some memories, maybe my children will understand the past in a better way. My other grandparents, they were glacial explorers. And they were glacial explorers at times when the glaciers were inaccessible and difficult to navigate. And my grandparents went on a honeymoon on Vatnajökull, Europe's biggest glacier. These expeditions were heroic, and my grandmother was one of the first women to be allowed to go on such a trip. And they were traveling and mapping and measuring. And they were stuck in a tent for 4 days. And once I asked my grandmother, because this was a 4-week trip, weren't you cold? And she said, cold? We were just married. At that time, I didn't really understand how you get warm when you get married. But these trips were big and extreme. And now the glaciers of Iceland have been measured and mapped for almost 70 years. So we have important data about the glaciers, and we can use this data to understand how the glaciers of Iceland will react to a warming climate. And we see that glaciers that looked like this in the year 2000 and look like this now will change over the next 100 years and actually vanish within the year 2120. And this is a difficult thing to grasp, how nature has left geological speed and entered human speed. A glacier should not melt in a single lifetime. A single human being should not witness a glacier vanishing. But this is the case and a fact that is happening now. So how do we connect to time? How do we feel urgency when a scientist says 2160? How do we feel that that relates to us? Universities today are full of students that are born in the year 2000. If these students become as old as my grandmother, they will be healthy, cool, old people in the year 2090. These people might have a favorite 20-year-old in their lives, born around 2070. That means the university students today, they will know and love somebody deeply that will still be alive in the year 2160. So our time is the time of the people that we know and love, the time that shapes us, versus the time of the people that we will know and love. So the time that I can touch with my bare hands would be the time of my grandmother from around 1920 up to perhaps 2130, 40. And in the case of my children, they can touch the year 2160 if they are lucky to reach old age. So even in the lifetime of my own son, the glaciers of Iceland have changed like this. So the Vatnajökull glacier has changed like this and this. So it's not only in the memory of the oldest people that this change is happening, it's happening also in the memory of the youngest people. So we are reaching strange times where glaciers are becoming water, and this water will flood major cities if things go on like they are predicted to go on. And we are also seeing new words, like the word ocean acidification. And ocean acidification is actually the biggest word in the world. It's about the fact that the oceans take up about 30% of the CO2 that goes into the atmosphere. And we believe that in the next 100 years, the ocean pH level will drop from 8.1 down to perhaps 7.7 or even 7.8. And this change is the greatest and most dramatic change in 50 million years. And there we have a question and a problem. How do we relate to 0.3 as something great? How do we feel that 50 million years can happen in a single lifetime of one human being? So a graph like this should cause an immediate paradigm shift. When we see how the glaciers are melting, how the sea level rises, and the pH of the oceans, how all elements of water on our planet are going out of balance, and now we're faced with this challenge that humans are burning 35 gigatons a year, and this is almost everything we are. This is almost everything we do, everything we eat, everything we do is connected to this burning and the superpower that fossil fuels give us. And we have to create renewable energy to displace all this burning, because we have created the greatest fires that the Earth has ever seen. 35 gigatons a year are like 600 volcanic eruptions like the ones that we have seen in Iceland. So anybody that has seen a volcanic eruption like this and thinks that 600 volcanic eruptions that go on day and night, decade after decade after decade, this will of course disrupt almost all Earth. So the next 30 years are all about this. the next 30 years, we have to get CO2 emissions to zero, and we have to fundamentally change our relationship to the future. We have to understand that 2160 is an intimate date, and we have to calculate for ourselves, when is someone still alive that you will love? In my case, 2130. In the case of my children, 2160. So, 2160, an intimate date of someone we love, and everything that is happening then is based on the decisions that we take now. In politics, in technology, everything we do now counts and matters, even more than ever. Thank you very much.
It was really an inspirational speech. I'm sure many of you have been enlightened by his insightful talks. Thank you very much, Mr. Anders Magnussen. And next, I'm very pleased to introduce our keynote speakers. Ms. Sigrid Kaag, the Minister of Foreign Trade and Development Cooperation, the Netherlands, and Mr. Jae-young Ho, the Chair of a Presidential Water Commission, Republic of Korea, will deliver keynote speeches. First, Ms. Minister Sigrid Kaag, who has served as a senior advisor to the United Nations, Deputy Director of UNICEF and Secretary General of the UN Development Program, will deliver a keynote speech today on accelerating joint action for climate-resilient water management. Let's meet together.
Excellencies, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, let me begin by saying how pleased I am to speak here at the thematic session on water and climate resilience at the second P4G summit. I'd like to thank South Korea for hosting this important summit and for guiding this initiative as its co-chair. In particular, I'd like to express our thanks to the Korean Ministry of Environment for organizing this session. As we work towards COP26 and the UN Water Conference in 2023, this summit is an excellent opportunity to lay some strong foundations. And we'll need these as we move towards accelerating the climate and water agenda, because the climate crisis is also a water crisis. And looking at the figures, it's clear just how much needs to be done. The UN recently reported that over 2 billion people live in countries with high levels of water stress. 2.2 billion people lack access to safe drinking water, and well over 4 billion people do not have safe sanitation. Water has always been unevenly distributed, but with all great divides, this divide will deepen even further in years to come. Some places will have deadly excesses of water, while others will face droughts. Some people will flee from water, while others will flee towards it. This is the dynamic of the climate crisis, and it's deeply destabilizing. In our quest to achieve climate neutrality and SDG 6, we have to quadruple our efforts. So clearly, we need to step up our game. We need to scale up green, innovative, and climate-smart water management initiatives into commercially viable solutions, ventures and partnerships that can be rolled out globally to the benefit of regular people as well as shareholders. We need solutions like the Valuing Water Initiative, which is intended to change the way we value water in policy, practice, and finance, with the aim of bringing water security closer to all. Or public-private partnerships like Finnish Mondial, which actively engages shareholders to jointly invest in climate-smart water solutions. All these examples show water is a clear business case and the green economy is a growing industry. Governments can create the right conditions, but to make it a success, we need the market. This is why initiatives such as P4G are vital. They help deliver on our commitments, accelerate our efforts, and bring us closer to achieving the SDGs and the Paris Accord. The Netherlands is therefore proud to be amongst P4G's main supporters. As you may know, we have a long history with water, both adverse and profitable. Large parts of my country have been reclaimed from the sea after centuries of sustained efforts. Throughout all those years, water was not just a threat, but also the foundation of our economy. Now, with the impact of climate change posing new challenges, we're looking ahead to find innovative solutions. We'll work towards climate resilience and we'll do our best together with our partners. We're proud to have hosted the Climate Adaptation Summit earlier this year, in which Minister Hahn graciously participated. In 2023, the Netherlands will co-host the UN Water Conference together with Tajikistan. This will be the second ever UN Water Conference, and it will be held 4 decades after the first one, so we might say it's a second start. It's crucial we get it right. Getting it right begins here, today, in Seoul. It begins in the acceleration of our actions on governance, innovation, finance, data availability, as well as investments in capacity building. It begins with the involvement of everyone affected, young people, indigenous peoples, and marginalized groups. And it begins in bringing together the stakeholders, not at least from the private sector. Let's do this together. All this is on the agenda today. Let's get it right, accelerate our path towards climate neutrality, clean water, and sanitation for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Minister, for your insightful presentation. Next, Mr. Tae-Young-ho, Chair of the Presidential Water Commission to realize integrated water management in Korea, will give a second keynote speech on good governance and strategy for carbon neutrality in water management for climate resilience. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Tae-Young-ho.
오늘 2021 P4G 서울 정상회의에 참석하게 되어 매우 기쁩니다. 귀중한 시간을 할애해 주신 세계 각국의 참석자 여러분께 환영과 감사의 인사를 드립니다. 또한 코비드-19의 어려운 상황에서 온 오프라인으로 정상회의를 준비해 주신 관계자 여러분들께도 경의를 표합니다. 내외 기빈 여러분, 지금까지 우리는 경제 성장을 위해 지구 환경, 기후, 인간 공동체를 무너뜨리고 내달려 왔습니다. 그 결과로 세계 곳곳에서는 폭염, 폭설, 태풍, 산불 등 지금까지 겪어보지 못한 규모의 이상기후 현상이 나타나고 있습니다. 기후변화로 인해 깨끗하고 충분한 양의 물을 구하기는 더 어려워졌고 코비드-19와 같은 감염병의 대유행에 이르기까지 우리 인류는 생존과 번영을 위협받고 있습니다. 2100년까지 지구 평균 기온의 상승을 1.5도씨 이내로 제한해야 기후변화의 폭주를 늦출 수 있다고 합니다. 다행스럽게도 세계 각국은 탄소 중립을 실현하면서도 경제를 발전시킬 수 있는 방안을 찾기 위해 나서고 있습니다. EU 등 주요 경제 국가들의 3분의 2는 이미 탄소 중립을 선언했습니다. 미국도 조 바이든 대통령 취임 직후 파리 협정에 재가입하고 2050년까지 탄소 중립을 이루겠다고 약속하여 세계의 움직임은 더 빨라질 전망입니다. 물은 기후변화에 미치는 영향이 큰 분야 중 하나입니다. 우리는 깨끗하고 안전한 물을 구하기 위해서 더 많은 에너지와 자원과 노력을 투입하고 있으면서 더 많은 양의 물을 사용하고 오염시키고 있습니다. 2019년에 유엔이 발간한 물 보고서에 따르면 전 세계 물 수요는 매년 1%씩 증가하고 있으며 심지어 우리가 탄소 중립을 이루어야 하는 2050년에는 지금보다 20 내지 30%가 늘어날 것으로 전망하고 있습니다. 물 분야에서야말로 더 이상 탄소 중립을 지체할 수 없습니다. 물 분야에서의 탄소 중립을 위해서 바로 지금 물을 잘 관리하고 재이용하여 물 사용량을 줄이며 물 처리에 드는 에너지를 효율적으로 절감하고 신재생 에너지를 적극 활용하여 탄소 발생을 줄이는 등 물 관리의 전 과정에서 선제적이고 과감한 전환이 필요합니다. 좋은 물 거버넌스는 먼저 다양한 주체의 참여가 보장되어야 합니다. 물은 경계 없이 흐르고 순환하며 시간과 공간에 따라 이해관계가 끊임없이 변화하고 수문학적 경계와 행정적 또는 국가적 경계가 일치하지 않는 경우가 많아서 불가피하게 갈등이 발생합니다. 어느 한 지역의 수자원이나 전력 확보를 위해 설치한 댐이 다른 지역의 환경을 파괴하고 결국 생존을 위협하는 사례를 세계 곳곳에서 적지 않게 볼 수 있습니다. 따라서 물 거버넌스에는 자연수계의 수리학적 영역인 유역을 중심으로 중앙정부, 지방정부, 공공기관, 기업과 시민 등 물순환 체계에 속해 있는 모든 분야와 연관된 주체가 모두 참여할 수 있어야 합니다. 또한 유역 내의 물 관리는 수량과 수질뿐만 아니라 침수 및 재해, 그리고 물 산업 등 전체의 메커니즘에서 환경, 보건, 에너지, 농업, 산업 등 기반 요소들과 통합적으로 연계되어야 합니다. 행정구역의 경계를 넘어 유역의 관점에서 통합적으로 관리하고 소수 이해관계자들의 요구를 포용하면서도 넘어서는 방식으로 물 관리의 가치인 공익성을 추구하고 중장기적인 일관성을 확보할 수 있을 것입니다. 또한 공익 중시의 물 정책을 통하여 얻은 혜택에 대해서는 적절한 수준의 비용을 부담하고 피해를 입는 당사자들에게는 적절한 피해 보상이 가능하도록 하는 합리적인 보상 체계가 마련된다면 거버넌스는 안정적으로 유지될 수 있을 것입니다. 그러나 물 분야는 불확실성이 커서 향후 물 분야의 탄소 중립을 위해 시도되는 수열 에너지, 수상 태양광 등은 그 계획이 구상되고 구체화되는 과정에서 그 유역의 새로운 이해 당사자들로 인하여 예상 밖의 분쟁과 갈등이 드러나기도 할 것입니다. 이러한 상황에서 다양한 의견을 조율하고 조정하는 과정에서 확대되는 이해관계자들의 합의를 이루는 데는 각별한 노력이 필요합니다. 추진 과정에서 단계별로 물 관련 재정, 이해관계자들의 요구, 제도 현황 등 관련 정보들을 투명하게 공개함으로써 여러 가지 대안을 검토하여 협력적으로 합의에 이를 수 있어야 합니다. 즉, 좋은 물 거버넌스는 사업이나 정책이 구체화되기 이전에 각 단계별로 대안들에 대하여 충분한 논의를 거쳐 최적의 대안이 도출될 수 있도록 협력적 의사결정 체계로 구축할 필요가 있습니다. 또한 체계적인 모니터링과 평가는 공공정책의 정당성과 합리성을 공고히 하여 현재와 미래에 직면할 물 문제에 적절하게 대응할 수 있는 대응력을 높이는 데 도움이 될 것입니다. 여러분, 제가 생각하는 좋은 물 거버넌스는 모든 이해관계의 책임과 권리가 균형 있게 작동하여 지속 가능한 방향으로 나아가는 체계입니다. 오늘 우리는 기후위기 극복을 위한 저탄소 물관리 솔루션을 만드는 데 필요한 지혜를 모으기 위해서 이 자리에 모였습니다. 물론 이러한 통합적 정책 솔루션을 도출하는 것은 기술적, 제도적으로 많은 어려움을 안고 있습니다. 감염병 위기가 세계 경제 위기로 이어져서 사회적 불평등이 심화되고 사회 안전망까지 불안하게 된 현 상황에서 온실가스를 줄이기란 쉽지 않은 과제입니다. 그러나 현 시대를 함께 살아가는 세계의 시민 여러분, 기후위기는 미래가 아니라 지금 해결해야 할 과제이므로 우리의 과잉 생산과 과잉 소비, 가난한 사람들의 존엄성 붕괴, 삶의 방식에 대한 성찰, 공동체의 회복을 생각해야 합니다. 우리는 지금 당장 과속도의 성장을 멈추고 우리의 사회 시스템을 담대하게 전환하는 일에 모든 역량을 집중해야 합니다. 대륙별 중견 국가들과 개발도상국이 모여서 인류애와 상생의 정신을 바탕으로 서로 상생하는 방안을 모색한다는 점에서 오늘의 이 자리는 그 어떤 국제협력보다 더 큰 의미가 있는 자리라고 생각합니다. 함께 가면 멀리 갈 수 있다는 말이 있습니다. 오늘 이 자리에서 논의된 내용들이 실현되고 그것이 성공 사례가 되고 이것들이 쌓이면 우리 인류에게 지금의 위기를 넘어서 더 나은 방식으로 더 오래 번영하는 더 나은 사회를 맞이할 계기가 될 것이라 믿습니다. 지구의 기후위기를 해결을 위한 의미 있는 큰 진전이 있기를 기대합니다. 감사합니다.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for sharing your knowledge and insights. Next, a panel discussion, which is the highlight of P4G thematic water session, will commence. 7 panelists will have a heated discussion on a total of 3 topics. The chair of this session, Mr. Sang-Gyun Cha, founding dean of Seoul National University Graduate School of Data Science, has been a successful entrepreneur who founded a company in Silicon Valley and served as the first president of Seoul National University's Big Data Research Institute. He is the foremost authority in memory and data management, indeed as well as in name. Then I'll hand over the mic to Mr. Chair and proceed with the panel discussion. Mr. Chair, please.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are. Welcome to the P4G thematic water session with the theme of carbon neutral smart water management for climate resilience. I'm Sang-Gyun Cha. I'm grateful for your participation today. The P4G thematic water session has been planned by the Ministry of Environment of the Republic of Korea and jointly organized by Korea Water Forum in collaboration with the K-Water. This session is to share the up-to-date knowledge and information on carbon-neutral smart water management for climate resilience towards sustainable development. The current state of art and trends of smart water management will be shared to our audience. 3 core pillars of today's discussions are: first, innovative technologies; second, well-developed policy; third, good governance. At the end of our discussion today, I wish everyone, the panelists and the audience participating here today, share the common vision that will be drawn out of our meaningful discussion based on these 3 pillars. Discussion on the state-of-the-art technologies of smart water management to reduce carbon emissions will be useful for designing better solutions at the local and regional levels. Good governance, supporting technology, and policy development will facilitate and catalyze collaboration among different parties. Additionally, finance and insurance, which are essential to make innovative water solutions affordable, will be an important topic to be addressed in this session. Today, discussion goes in the following order. First, wise water solutions to climate resilience through innovative technologies. Second, policies and the best practices of water management for climate resilience. Third, policies and good governance for climate resilience and water management. Before we begin our discussion today with the honorable panelists, I would like to introduce our youth delegates all around the world, our next generation. Join me in welcoming our 5 youth delegates. I hope this session is interesting to the audience online. We will collectively find new normal solutions for moving forward in carbon-neutral smart water management. Now it is my honor to introduce today's distinguished panelists. Ms. Anna Hiros, the Senior Executive VP of the Suez. Ms. Meena Sankaran, the CEO of the Catos in the United States. Ms. Cristal Quezera, the CEO of Water Access Rwanda, Ms. Jennifer Sarr, the Global Director of the Water Global Practice of the World Bank, Mr. Jaehyun Park, the CEO of K-Water, Republic of Korea, Mr. Howard Bamsey, the Chair of the Global Water Partnership, Mr. Rodolphe Lacey, the Director of Environment Directorate of the OECD. I appreciate your valuable time and contribution to the session. Now let me introduce briefly myself. I'm the Dean of the Graduate School of Data Science, Seoul National University. I've been on the faculty of this university almost 30 years. My technical expertise is not the water, but database and AI platform technologies. However, in my career, I founded a startup in Silicon Valley and merged this company to SAP, the largest software company in Europe, and served as the chief architect of SAP's new platform called SAP HANA. And here I'm today to discuss three phases of technology innovation, policy development, and the good governance with you.
And I'm sure many viewers may wonder about how water management actually works in our lives. So we have prepared a short clip to introduce how Korean water management goes with smart solution. So please join us watching it.
The Republic of Korea has recognized the importance of policymaking in carbon reduction and is now working to realize net zero by 2050.
대한민국 정부는 탄소 중립 사회를 향한 첫걸음인 그린 뉴딜을 통해 깨끗하고 안전한 물관리 체계를 만들어가고 있습니다. 특히 상하수도, 댐 등 물관리 기반 시설에 AI와 ICT 등 첨단 기술을 접목해 지속가능한 스마트 물관리 체계를 구축하고 빅데이터에 기반한 AI 홍수예보 시스템을 도입해 기후위기에 대응해 나가고 있습니다.
Water management facilities produce significant amount of greenhouse gases because of their energy consumption. With this in mind, the Korean government established a clear direction for carbon neutrality in water management.
In order to realize carbon neutrality, K-Water has adopted a two-track strategy. First, expansion of renewable energy, and second, transformation into low-energy water management. With this strategy, we aim to reduce carbon emissions up to 5 billion tons by 2030, which will take up about 1.8% of Korea's reduction goal over the same period.
K-Water, an official supporter of carbon neutrality, plans to use renewable energy to this end. An alternative used for development and carbon reduction is the floating photovoltaic power that uses water surface in dams. Hapjeon Dam, along with other dam infrastructures under K-Water's management, can provide power to 4.13 million households every year. Hydrothermal energy, which uses the temperature difference between water and air to produce energy, is used to increase production through projects. K-Water's water treatment process also makes use of photovoltaic and hydrothermal energies heavily. Meanwhile, advanced technologies are used to minimize energy loss and lay the ground for carbon neutrality in the Korean water system. K-Water also uses smart water management systems in managing its water facilities such as dams and water supplies to maximize the efficiency of electric and water treatment facilities. These measures will help reduce these facilities' energy consumption and prevent water-related disasters like flood or drought. K-Water uses excellent technologies of startups and small and medium enterprises and proactively supports its corporate partners in taking the initiative in the rapidly changing global market.
Singapore is one of the most water-stressed countries in the world. in spite being located in the tropics. We at PUB will search endlessly for ways to meet our water needs. PUB seeks to conserve resources when we treat water. We work hard and aim to be energy neutral and positive in all our work areas. PUB is leveraging on solar panel to power our plants. We are putting solar panels on our reservoirs and rooftops, and we want to do more.
We promote the effective governance for SDGs. We must strengthen effective, inclusive, and accountable governance on carbon neutral water management. Global solidarity should be expanded to overcome the climate crisis.
Our decisions and actions toward building a sustainable future will be the basis in overcoming the climate crisis and realizing water welfare in the world.
Now let's begin our first topic, innovative water technology solutions for climate resilience. Regarding this topic, I would like to invite three panelists, Ms. Anna Hiros, Meena Sankaran, Crystal Quijera. Ms. Hiros, why don't you go ahead first? Recently, the EU introduced the policy package of European Green Deal to achieve the carbon neutral goal in 2050. Suez is the leading company in the global water industry. Please tell us the most important issues in the global water industry and the relevant business cases of Suez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, afternoon, and evening to all. So I'm very honored to have the chance to share with you what a company like Suez, that is a global leader in the environmental services and very especially on the water, with very wide presence across the world. So we believe that environment, climate, economy, quality of living, everything is very interconnected. And in parallel to that, as you rightly say, there's a huge climate crisis creating a lot of phenomena all over the world, and therefore resilience is a word that should be put on the table, and we should also work on it. So as an European company, basically, we've been very much involved on the European Green Deal, and we had the chance to make some recommendation on the water and on the waste sectors. As I would say, as the first recommendation and thing we've done is to really commit and reshape our missions, embedding the strategy to reduce emissions in all our strategic plan. So basically reduce by 45% the direct and indirect greenhouse gas emission from our activities until 2030 and get our 90,000 employees on board on that, very concretely, helping our customers to avoid more than 20 million tons of CO2 every year by energy savings, by carbon capture solutions, by waste to energy solutions. And finally, we've reshaped our value proposal to offer 100% sustainable solutions. Therefore, we've really readapted our technologies to the market. So maybe in this intervention, to illustrate a few innovations, because innovation is key in this respect, that we've been putting forward and deploying across the globe. So the first one I would like to share with you is the combination of desalination with the supply of renewable energies. And we've created an alliance with energy partners to make sure that the desalination plants, on top of optimizing the energy consumption, come mixed with renewable. It can be wind farms, it can be solar panels, it can be other means more linked to the oceans, but basically that we couple those two technologies to make a carbon neutral effect at regional level. A second element I would like to share is basically all the big potential of the digital in the water tools. Digital to improve the use of the water and optimize municipal and industrial consumption, but also to optimize floods and in case of extreme events. So today we are managing remotely the different weather forecasts to make sure that all the pipes and the reservoirs are aligned to make sure that when there is a flood, we sort of capitalize as much as possible the water being dropped, and this avoids impacts in the urban surface. Third element that I think it's, and we will have maybe the chance to discuss it further afterwards, is the water reuse. The water reuse and somehow the paradigm of from a wastewater treatment plant use everything that is coming out as bioresources. So of course the reused water, but also some byproducts like fertilizers, like energy and bioenergy that will come out of the anaerobic digestions. All this is a market that shall be by far explored and scale up. And we are doing this in emerging markets like in Latin America, but also across Europe, in Spain and in France, in many plants. So water reuse and the production of bioresources. My last word would be on what do we believe that are the challenges to implement all this. One of the big challenges is regulation, and I hope the next panelist will talk about it, because regulation, especially in the reuse of the water. So how do we get, and then the second element is the funding, because we have a lot of carbon-related indicators that give priority on financing mitigation projects, more access to the carbon. But we believe that we need some water-related indicators also, because as you previously said, water and carbon are completely linked and interconnected. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your comprehensive answer. Now I would like to ask Ms. Sankaran about the use of technologies. I understand Captos is using AI for predictive analysis in water management. What is the current state of art, and how does this help to cope with global climate resilience?
Thank you, everyone. First off, it's an honor to be here, and I really appreciate the opportunity to speak among such distinguished guests. Good morning. It's quite an early morning here in California, and so excited. So one of the first things fundamentally as a group, as a global leadership organization, all of us have to be doing is how do we bring water conversations to the forefront? How do we as a society really prioritize in what we do every single day towards water? And that means not just having the best of technology, but making those policy decisions where have the right allocation of capital and budget, and fundamentally the shift in mindset. Like if you're talking about utilities in cities around the world, most utilities and workforce don't even have the capability to adopt the technologies that you're innovative and that you're building. And if you're not able to tool the cities with the right sustainable workforce, you're not going to make a city smarter. And part of that is how does policy go in lockstep with technology? And the reason why I'm sharing this is that's one of the challenges that Kitos has always had to face as we bring something very disruptive into the market. You cannot act on what you don't measure. So when you think about water management, fundamentally the first step is how do you digitize all assets? People have collected water data over decades, but it's in different shapes and forms. So how do you first digitize all the assets so you have a common baseline? The second thing is you build an entire decentralized sensor network. There are lots of different types of smart sensors around now in the market. How do you build a very strong decentralized sensor grid network so that you have distributed real-time intelligence that's able to provide you the kind of insights that you're missing today? And Kitos has several solutions to enable that. But as soon as you have that data, because today you're not detecting that data, and some of the solutions that Kitos offers is about detecting heavy metal ions, because a lot of potentially what you heard about Flint, Michigan, or what you heard about a lot of issues is about inability to detect things like arsenic and lead and manganese, and potentially, you know, COVID or other bacterial pathogens, others in water proactively so you can do something about it. And essentially, once you've done this distributed grid, you've built this sensory network, you now have a massive data lake, which is what Kitos has been able to create, is a first layer of a massive data lake. Once you have this, the brilliant minds around the world, how we democratize this data into creating layers. And that's where the artificial intelligence comes in, because now you can take vectors like seasonality, all the aspects of climate volatility, and say, well, what are the regions where you're having high flood risk? What are the regions you're having certain types of impact, potential other man-made disasters, like maybe some mining sites that were decommissioned, that's penetrating into some toxicity in your groundwater. Understanding all these aspects, it's a very interconnected world, like how Anna said, and how you bring all this together into that AI layer is going to give you the required predictive intelligence. Because then you understand, how has water quality shifted over the last 10 years? Why is there a peak in terms of public health impact in certain regions versus other regions? How are we looking at climate impact if the aquifer water is consistently dropping? Any understanding of all the problems we're thinking about towards climate resilience starts with first understanding of data at the ground level. And that means collecting the data and actually visualizing the data, assessing the data, parsing it, and being able to make data more, I would say, information rich rather than information poor, because we tend to have a lot of data, but then we don't realize what's actionable, what is insightful in that process. And that's part of the core Quito's mission. Can we potentially prevent a disease outbreak in the future? Is it possible? And I think it's possible, but it has to be people, process, technology, all of it combined together, working in unison, if we want to really create any sort of a sustainable future for our lives.
Well, thank you very much for your answering or describing all the technical aspect of dealing with this water quality and all the problems associated with the issue. I'm glad actually I hear a lot of technical stuff that I understand. Well, thank you again. Now, Mrs. Cristel Quijera, the appropriate technology should be selected according to the conditions of each region. The water access Rwanda is contributing to the water supply, not only in Rwanda, but also in the neighboring countries. Many countries in Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asia still have a difficulty in basic water supply for living. So it seems that the smart water technology might not be their priority. How do you define the smart water management in your context? Which area are you focusing on?
Thank you, moderator, fellow distinguished panelists and other speakers on this call. I'm blessed to be here. I'm glad to share the work that Water Access is doing. I think some of the speakers said it really correctly at the beginning. There is still 2.2 billion people worldwide who don't have access to safe water. And we have to get it right. The way we provide them water cannot reproduce the same mistakes that were done before with how we provision people with water. So in the specific case of Rwanda, Rwanda is a very mountainous country. It's a drainage basin for the Nile. So on a per second basis, the country is losing about 77 meter cubes of water draining into the Nile. So the focus of the country is to increase artificial storage of water so that if the rain reduces, which we have seen already, we don't lose our storage in the aquifers, because we've seen that most of our aquifers in Rwanda have between 6 and 25 years of storage of water, which is not enough time. And that water is being depleted, not from human activity, but as a general condition of our country. So there is some idea there of cross-border engagement. But where we come in as a business case now with Water Access Rwanda, one, we're very focused on not repeating the mistakes of the past. So we're looking at creating water grids that are more sustainable, don't lose as much water to leakages, don't lose as much water to revenue losses, don't let water be contaminated without detection, but also provide water that does meet the human right to water, which means water that is accessible, that is affordable within 3% of a person's income, and provides a sufficient amount of water at least the 50 liters recommended by WHO. So there, as a company, what we do, we focus on looking at the technologies that enable that kind of sustainable access, and we create innovative business models that create triple bottom line gains. So we're looking at a business model that will drive profit for our company, but at the same time be driving positive results on people and positive results on the planet. So I'll give 2 examples. The first one is the Amasi, which is focused on urban rainwater harvesting. At the same time, they're letting water run off from their roofs, and this water is causing runoff and erosion, which it's a cycle that's making the river water expensive. And you find that on one side, you have the water treatment plants that cannot purify the water. You have urban residents that are out of water and are not harvesting rainwater, which is in the end causing the issue. So it's quite a cycle. So where we come in, first of all, we look at rewarding people who harvest rainwater by giving them systems that are affordable, allow them to save on their water bill overall when it's raining. So rainwater is indeed free water from the heavens. And in this essence, government can come in and subsidize the people who harvest the rainwater because they're saving a lot of money in cleaning up after runoffs, landslides, and so on. The second example is when you look at rural water access. Right now, in many cases in Africa, people are still going to the rivers to do their laundry. They're still boiling water before drinking because the water they have access to is not safe. But at the same time, it's not convenient. Families, especially children and women, are wasting a lot of hours every day working for water. Some cases we see upwards of 3 hours per day just on the task of fetching water. And this creates a lot of burden on domestic work for women, but in particular children who from a very young age are taught to carry a jerry can so they can get water for their families. Now, how we come in, we create water mini-grids. Instead of looking at the old age solution championed by very many charities of digging hand pumps that usually get broken, we go to those same hand pumps, rehabilitate them, and install state-of-the-art water mini-grid where the water is purified before being piped into people's homes. Our mini-grid is not larger than 2 kilometers in radius, so monitoring on water quality is easier. We can service islands, remote communities, as cheaply as we can service people on a larger complex grid in a city. So there is a whole idea there about equitable access to water, and we need to increase the infrastructure, especially in countries where the infrastructure is not very available. But as we do it, we have to do it in the right way. That does not create more issues for the planet, but do it right now, learning from lessons of how we've been providing water wrong in the past to make sure that the way we do it now is a way that avoids water leakages, unnecessary water leakages, unnecessary water quality challenges, and unnecessary pricing and affordability challenges. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ms. Kujara, for sharing the regional aspect, different perspective in detail. Now, let me move on. It'll be good to come back to Ms. Anna Huros. Since the carbon neutral has become a significant global agenda, the water industry also needs to be changed accordingly. What do you think the most promising technology in water industry? What will be the future direction for this field and the need of carbon neutral water management?
Thank you. Yes, indeed, the ecosystems are getting very complex, and the water industry is changing a lot because we are more and more integrated. And I think Mena mentioned it well when we say we are more and more integrated in global value chains, and we need data, but we also need to understand the upstream, the downstream, and get integrated into that without just combining companies, but really working in partnership. So that's why Suez is working in many alliances. So one of the important ones is the Business Alliance for Water and Climate. And more we try to work in the private ecosystem, but also with the social ecosystem and the administration to make the things happen and move forward. Indeed, the rise of digital technologies holds a great potential, and for me it's the major one. in terms of environmental challenges. So we use digital for sustainable cities to consume less resources. We use digital to deploy in intelligent agriculture. We have to know that in most of the places of the world, agriculture consumes 70-75% of the water at country level. So it's also a field where technology shall be deployed. And then, of course, to prevent natural disasters that happen more and more often around the globe. So digital, it has to be implemented wisely, because just data for data doesn't really bring a lot of added value, but we need people knowing well the networks and being able to pragmatically implement software that help on decision making and that calibrate the resources needed. And one of the things that has opened a bit our eyes, it's been all this wake-up call around pandemic that we've just suffered in the last 2 years. So the basic hygiene health challenge that we are facing at world level, and I think the pandemic also showed us what we've said several times, that 1 person out of 3 in the globe don't have access to safe drinking water. And therefore, barriers for pandemic didn't exist in many continents of the world. So this is something that even in emerging markets, I believe, like the telecom, this leapfrogging of passing from very basic infrastructure to something with digital that is bringing us to a different level, and we should have a quality of service that makes a lot of sense. The other technical solution that has been largely work, and I think it's something that regarding carbon-less solutions, it's a clear target, is to build on the conventional wastewater systems and make them really change to the next level, and work in a sort of biofactory site that we've done in Chile as a bit as a showcase, but we are deploying all over the globe, recovering water, recovering nutrients, recovering energy, and getting to a point where in a city like Santiago de Chile, with one of the biggest wastewater plants in the world, that cleans 7 million inhabitants wastewater sewage, we get to a neutral carbon solution. So therefore, there is no waste, there is no non-renewable energy used, and there is a complete circular economy around the site. So this is something that, and it's an example in Latin America, so it's on purpose, not an example in Europe or in the US, is something that we are deploying, and that emerging markets can go much quicker because infrastructure doesn't exist, so we can build it from day one on new technologies. So that's a bit the global picture I would like to share, but I'm sure there's a lot of examples that are implemented in term of efficiency, basically at physical performance in the networks, but also site performance especially on the wastewater treatment plants.
Well, thank you very much for sharing the effort at the local and regional level of the Suez. And it's great to hear that digitalization is one of the key, to pursue in the future. Then we could move to Ms. Sankaran again. The carbon neutral smart water management is a new business opportunity for many startups and SMEs. What could be strategies for those companies?
Thank you for that question, moderator, especially because Kitos is a startup as well. And I think at World Water Day this year, we all asked ourselves, what is the value of water to us? And I think, I love the response that Christelle kind of shined upon, where, for Kitos, it's realizing both the social and the financial value of water, which is very critical. And as part of the question of carbon neutrality, 80% of the water from probably most global countries today is left untreated when it's going back into the nature. And so that's already 3 times the amount of carbon emissions that you would see in a traditional wastewater plant. And these are very quick opportunities for us to implement solutions that are valuable. And one of the fundamental values of what Kitos' innovative technology delivers is the ability to monitor effluent discharge in real time and be able to offer the operator and empower the operator in being able to take that action towards delivering a lot more safer water relatively that you can use for water reuse, water recycling, and potentially get to where plants can have zero liquid discharge. So there's a lot of opportunities in terms of overall redesigning of how you're developing your effluent, and whether it's industrial, Quito's lands up working a lot in industrial, whether it's oil and gas, mining, power plants, paper and pulp, an extensive variety of industry, but also in agriculture. And Anna very rightfully said 70% of water consumption is in agriculture. And Quito's has always looked at it as, how do we look at the yin and yang of water? Because you have to think about water quality with water efficiency. You can't solve for one without the other. And 14 trillion gallons of water just is lost in leaks annually in US. That's treated water. So how do you really work towards both water efficiency and water quality and implement systems along the way that are reducing carbon emissions? I think fundamentally it comes down to not making decisions in silos, looking at architectures as a whole, looking at sustainability as a whole, looking at holistically, how does all of these systems and solutions, both legacy as well as net new, interoperate together so that you're moving towards a lot more smarter, sustainable infrastructure. And I think that starts all the way from a single farmer to a single water plant to a single potential commercial facility, as well as a smaller city. And those are just one quick example. And as the population increases by 2050 and as the food demand increases, I think one of the key pieces we have to be thinking about is how we're managing food supply and the water required for that food supply. So there are several aspects of equitable distribution that we're not even touching upon today, from low-income community water distribution to higher. So Quito's really focuses on how do you also build innovative business models to help low-income communities and other regions that don't have the water supply that you're able to get today in other cities, and really looking at circular economy where you're actually leveraging and empowering the local youth to be involved as part of that delivery of that solution as well. So I think there's many angles to this. It's not a linear issue, and I think it's one of the most complex problems this generation faces. And as rightfully said by multiple speakers, time is of the essence.
Well, Ms. Sankaran, thank you very much for sharing your different angles. I mean, your different business opportunities, based on this solution. And I might have to think about the starting company again. Because of time limit, we probably have to move on to the next topic. Let me first summarize the first topic. The carbon neutrality is the representative goal to achieving net zero carbon dioxide emission by balancing emission or eliminating emissions of CO2 in the transition to the post-carbon economy. It was very impressive to see the efforts done by the industry. By having 3 pillars today, we indirectly experienced the actual case of reducing carbon emission in the application of technologies, and we understand what hurdles we are facing as well. Thank you. Now we would like to move on to the next topic, policies and the best practice of water management for climate resilience. Applying proper, well-developed policies, another pillar of the carbon-neutral smart water management. As a policy aligns with the principle of action adopted by government and political condition, and the state of awareness on current paradigm shift of the sector are highly influential in political and organizational decision-making procedures. From this perspective, policy development aligning with the global paradigm plays the role of a cornerstone to realize sustainable practices for climate resilience. For this topic, I would like to ask Ms. Sarah from the World Bank Group. Ms. Sarah, you are an expert highly recognized in the water sector with 30 years experience in the World Bank. The global water community highly recognized the effort of the World Bank to respond to climate resilience by providing sustainable water solutions and supporting universal access to clean water and sanitation with an active portfolio of over $25 billion. Would you please share your ideas how the World Bank's strategy and policies have set up on the climate resilience and what the core factors to realize those plans?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. This is an absolutely fascinating panel and conversation. As you mentioned, at the World Bank, we've just launched our new corporate commitment, our Climate Change Action Plan, which sets a goal that 35% of all World Bank financing must have climate co-benefits, equally shared between adaptation and mitigation. Within that context, the Water Global Practice supports countries to achieve their water secure vision for the whole country and put in place, importantly, policies, regulations, and investment programs that will help them to sustain their water resources while at the same time delivering water services and all kinds of water services, water and sanitation, water for food, water for energy, but also to build resilience as doing that. But we can't just talk about co-benefits, and we heard this at the very beginning of the presentation today. What we need to do is really help countries think about how to embrace a fundamental new development paradigm as to how they think about water. First, how they're going to adapt to the variability in the water cycle that will result from climate change, but also the whole mitigation agenda, how to help through the water, investments in water to reduce GHG emissions as much as possible, and how they manage and use water. And again, as many other speakers said, this is not water for water's sake, but water to generate energy, to make food, and to deliver the health outcomes. And of course, we learned from Korea how water is so important to unleash the potential of cities. We also agree with the previous panelists that there are some quick wins. The first biggest win is to reduce inefficiencies in the water sector, to reduce the losses in cities and on farms and irrigation. The second one, of course, is to embrace renewable technologies, solar energy, multi-purpose reservoirs for storing water, and using renewable energy to run the water systems, which we heard also. And finally, the last point, which was also mentioned, was the need to properly collect, treat wastewater, and to reuse that wastewater. So these are all points raised by our previous speakers. I think what's important is how do we help countries move towards their NDCs and adopt and learn from other countries, the sound analytics that helps them inform the policymakers and regulators to make informed decisions on their investments, but also how we can crowd in innovation. These are fantastic things we've just heard from the previous panelists on innovations. But what are the procurement policies and what are the regulations in the country that allow them to adopt these innovations and to scale them up? And that's an area that we're very, very keen to work on. So let me stop there because I just think this is a fascinating conversation and we're really looking forward to the partnerships because that's what we need to accelerate development in other countries is to bring together the partnerships and lessons from others. Thank you.
Thank you. How the World Bank paves its way toward the climate resilience exactly represent the message we want to deliver through this discussion. Thank you again, Ms. Sarah. Now, the water sector is the area mostly affected by the climate change. K-Water in Korea takes in charge of national water management, including water supply and the dam control. Please tell us about climate crisis management of K-Water and the result of it.
예, K-워터는 지난 반세기 넘게 국민 물 복지와 물 안전을 위해 최선을 다해왔지만 최근 몇 년간 심화되는 물 재해를 보면서 기후변화 대응의 중요성을 절실히 체감하고 있습니다. 작년 11월 공기업 최초로 기후위기 경영을 선언했고 기후변화 완화 및 적응을 위한 노력을 사업 전반에 반영하고 있습니다. 먼저 기후변화 완화의 핵심인 온실가스 감축을 위해 신재생 에너지를 대폭 확대하고 저에너지형 물관리 전환을 추진 중에 있습니다. 수력과 조력 발전에 더해 K-워터가 2012년, 2014년 국내 최초로 상용화한 수상 태양광 및 수열 에너지의 노하우를 댐과 수도 인프라와 융합해 지속적으로 신재생 에너지 개발을 확대해 나갈 계획입니다. 물 생산에 있어서도 K-워터의 모든 정수장에 대한 탄소 중립을 추진 중에 있고 현재 2개 정수장이 달성되어졌습니다. 이러한 노력을 기반으로 2035년에는 국가 온실가스 감축 목표의 3%에 해당하는 온실가스 790만 톤 감축을 실현해 나갈 계획입니다. 기후변화 적응을 위해서는 인공지능, 디지털 트윈 등 4차 산업혁명 기술을 활용한 스마트 물관리 및 디지털 전환에 박차를 가하고 있습니다. 드론이나 빅데이터 등을 활용한 스마트댐 수량, 수질, 안전관리 체계가 구축 중에 있고 국가 상수도 전반에 AI 및 ICT를 접목한 스마트 물관리 구축을 2023년까지 완료할 예정입니다. 추가적으로 기후위기 시대의 물산업 창출을 위해 수백 개의 스타트업과 중소기업을 지원하여 육성하는 등의 노력을 하고 있습니다. K-워터는 올해 3월 ESG 경영을 선언했고 4월 국내 공기관 최초로 RE100에 가입하는 등 기후위기 경영 기조를 이어가고 있습니다. 물 분야 글로벌 리딩 기업으로서 K-워터의 정책, 기술적 노력이 국내에 한정되지 않고 기후변화로 인해 물 문제로 고통받고 있는 많은 국가들에게 확산될 수 있도록 최선을 다하도록 하겠습니다.
Well, it's impressive to know the effort of K-Water for climate resilience. Thank you for sharing the effort of K-Water, Mr. Park. Again, Ms. Sara, the international financial institutions like the World Bank Group are also playing significant roles in water management for tracking the global climate crisis in addition to national effort. What are your suggestions for financing climate resilience at the national level?
Thank you. That's a very important question. We know even before the pandemic, the water sector was facing an investment gap of about $150 billion, and that's just to achieve universal access to water and sanitation. And that figure doesn't even include the amount of investment that's needed for better water resource management and for agriculture. Now we know with the economic shock of the pandemic, it's either further shrunk the fiscal space in many countries. So what we need to really do is look for win-win solutions and investments where we can help countries to mitigate and adapt as part of their regular investment strategy rather than putting on top of something. So it's integrated into their planning on how they make investment choices. And there's ways to do that where we make investments that really bring the mitigation benefits while also providing employment opportunities. For example, in Indonesia, we're working with the government to help them improve irrigation service delivery to farmers, but that allows the farmers to increase their incomes, but at the same time to reduce the methane emissions and manage water better. But while we look at new sources of financing, it's very, very important to manage the existing funding better and more efficiently. And that's what we see a lot of losses in the system and inefficient use of existing funding. But in addition to that, of course, we need to crowd in additional funding, and that's going to be required from the public sector, from domestic finance, from the private sector, and lots of opportunities to crowd in PPPs. But interestingly enough, between 2012 and 2017, water supply and sanitation, the sector only accounted for 1% of commercial finance mobilized by development finance. So we need to find a way, how do we crowd in commercial finance into the sector in a way that we can de-risk it? How do we use concessional money to de-risk finance? And it comes back to sound policies and reliable regulations. And so I think that's a space that's very, very important for us. And finally is the point of how do we crowd in technological innovations, because that does reduce the investment cost that's needed. And again, we look forward to working with all of you to be able to think through the crowding in of innovations and new ways innovating in financing as well to help their countries meet their service delivery targets. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sarah. I think many of our audience and the stakeholders got helpful information to understand the financing from or with the World Bank. Now, Mr. Park, for the carbon neutral water management for climate resilience, the effort from the public sector is also very important. Could you please share your opinion on the role of public sector in this movement?
예, 세계는 지난 수십 년간 기후위기 대응에 한 목소리를 냈지만 이제는 선언을 넘어 실질적이고 직접적인 행동이 요구되는 때입니다. 민간 영역의 노력과 함께 공공 부분의 강력한 실행 의지 등 다각적인 협력 체제가 확립될 때 탄소 중립 물 관리에 도달할 수 있다고 생각합니다. 공적 성량이 높은 물 분야는 공공 부분에서 먼저 탄소 중립에 대한 아젠다를 제시하고 민간 부분 등 이해 당사자와 함께 정책을 집행하는 것이 필요합니다. 공공 부분에서는 탄소 중립 물 관리 방향을 제시하고 이해 당사자와 공동으로 정책을 추진할 경우에 지자체를 비롯한 민간 부분까지 변화를 이끌어낼 수 있을 것입니다. 이를 통해 민간 부분의 다양하고 새로운 물관리 기술들이 개발, 활용되고 되어서 탄소 중립을 실현할 수 있는 신물산업 시장이 형성될 수 있다, 그렇게 생각을 합니다. 이런 기반 아래에서 공공 부분 및 민간 부분의 정책, 기술적인 상호 피드백이 계속된다면 탄소 중립 물 관리를 조기 실현하는 계기가 될 수 있을 것이라고 생각합니다. 한편으로 정책 실행 수단 확보 및 신기술 발전에 있어서 공공 부분을 주축으로 한 다양한 이해 당사자가 참여하는 파트너십이 필요하며 P4G는 주요국 정부, 국제기구, 물기업이 모두 참여하는 글로벌 플랫폼으로서 정책 사례 공유와 물 관련 아젠다 발굴에 좋은 모델이 될 것으로 생각을 합니다. 감사합니다.
Thank you for sharing your insight. The policy development and the public initiative at the national and the global level indeed is the core essence to make every subsector take the next step toward the sustainable growth and the climate resilience. Now, our last topic today is the common enabler of previously discussed two pillars, which is the good governance and the policy for climate resilience and water management. Mr. Bamsey, thank you for waiting. I would like to begin by asking you, the chair of the Global Water Partnership, who has led the global green action with outstanding professional careers over the past few decades. We understand you have led the international community improving governance on green growth and integrated water resource management. Please share your thought on the solution to balance those complex interests between countries and regions having transboundary issues.
Well, thank you very much, moderator, and thank you to all the colleagues for, as Jennifer said, a really fascinating discussion. And I think the way in which you've chosen to identify the three pillars this evening of technology and policy and governance really recognises the integration of those factors in enabling good decision making on water matters. And perhaps I'll come back to that later, but to deal directly with your question, transboundary water really does matter. There are about 260 water basins around the world that are managed across boundaries, and of course the potential for tension in that management process is very high, and and we identify that as an important cautionary note. But it's possible, I think, to see that potential tension in another way as an opportunity for cooperation and a real benefit in a sense. I think the record supports that view, actually. It's probably a surprise to others as it was to me to discover that going back really and for more than for 70 years or so, if we look at the management of transboundary water, it's led to conflict in fewer than 40 cases around the world. But at the same time, about 300 transboundary agreements on how to share water have been concluded. So I think there's a strong case for seeing the transboundary management as a real opportunity for progress and cooperation. But of course, it won't happen unless that's what governments want and unless the people who support those governments want it as well. So it's important in that management process to have strong governance. And that means including those who really have the highest stake in the management of the transboundary resources. And again, where agreements have been found and frameworks have worked, that's what's happened. I think if you look at, for example, the UNECE framework, that's a very clear case. Just one, I'm looking at the time, and just one more factor I think to mention that demonstrates how the three pillars we've been discussing tonight fit together. You can't have good management of any water resource, and particularly of transboundary resources, where you have different authorities on either side or on different sides of the boundary. Sometimes there are many more than two involved. You can't have that without shared information, without information that's common to all. And so the discussion we've had earlier about digitizing data, making its interpretation widely available, democratizing it, I think was what Mina said. That's very important as well. And that will underpin any successful management of transboundary resources. Of course, climate change is going to make all this more difficult. It's going to make the potential for conflict stronger, but it also gives us much greater incentives for cooperation to make transboundary management work well. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Well, I cannot more agree with you on first sharing the information, for transboundary collaboration. The shared benefits and the shared responsibility of the process could be the key words, I guess. Thank you for sharing your perspective. Mr. Raisi, thank you for your patience. Finally, I would like to ask you about OECD's vision and the strategic plans. I would like to ask for your opinion on how water policy and governance can help respond to global climate crisis.
Thank you very much, Professor Sankin. Well, the international community is increasingly aware of how the global climate crisis and the water issues intersect. Some of the core mitigation options can only be implemented if the availability of water resources and robust water management are factored in. So think of how much renewable energy sources, hydropower being the best example, or carbon removals through forests depend on water. Moreover, climate change will essentially manifest itself through the water cycle, with increased water demand and enhanced exposure and vulnerability to water risk. All extreme weather events are related with water. It follows that water policies and management play a central part in adapting to climate change. A recent OECD report on nature-based solutions illustrates the intimate relationships between water and the global climate crisis and options to address the issue. We know that nature-based solutions have a potential to provide benefits across areas such as climate, biodiversity, and water, as well as being a cost-effective, flexible response to climate change. Nature-based solutions face barriers, as many other environmental policies, for its implementation, as they have different characteristics and requirements than conventional approaches to infrastructure provision. One of the examples could be the construction of barriers to protect our communities from hurricanes, for example. The use of wetlands for flood management requires more land than reinforcing a dike or a levee. So faces different performance uncertainties, different timelines, and involves different stakeholders. So the OECD is currently engaged in a program of work on nature-based solutions. I'm really happy to announce that in September, in the road to the COP26, the OECD will co-convene a meeting of the Roundtable on Financing Water with the US government, focused on how financing water can really contribute to climate action, to adaptation measures, to have more resilient communities and reduce the vulnerability of our countries to extreme weather events. So finally, I would like to emphasize that this year, countries have a unique opportunity to rethink their responses to the climate crisis, as they are putting together ambitious policy packages to recover from the COVID-19 crisis. At the moment, and according with the OECD data, only 17% of the money dedicated to the economic recovery is going to green measures. So this is an opportunity to further secure action that combines robust water management and appropriate responses to the global climate crisis. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. I also agree with your last point. With the COVID crisis, we can also, open a new chapter for solving this problem. I can imagine how OECD is combining policy and governance for dealing with the intersection of climate crisis and the water would bring many organizations and people together for the actions toward the climate resilience. Thank you again. Mr. Bamsey, now I come back to you. Enhancement of water security is the core value of water management, responding to the climate crisis. The Global Water Partnership, chaired by yourself, has delivered to the global water community valuable messages promoting water security and responding to global climate crisis. Please share your insight on the future direction of good governance with any represented cases.
Thanks very much, and I'll try to be very brief. We draw on the experience that we've acquired in the 25 years of the partnership with our 3,000 partner organizations around the world, which are organized individually and into 65 country water partnerships and 16 regional water partnerships. So we have very comprehensive experience of decision-making about water and over a long period. And we strongly support, and we see this as really fundamental for the future, the notion of integrated water resource management, which sounds complicated, but of course is really just common sense. It just recognizes the fact that decision-making about water is essentially political. And that means that fundamentally all of the stakeholders, as I said earlier, all of the stakeholders in the resource that we're just making decisions about, all of them have to be involved in some way or other. Nobody can be marginalized. It's important for the poor, especially for women and for young people, to be fully engaged. And that's the experience we've found is that when that is done, when decision making is based on sound governance structures and practices, it's going to be successful. So we need to identify, we have a systematic way of thinking about this, looking at enabling frameworks, at institutional frameworks, at technology, and we've discussed that well this evening. And Roberto mentioned financing, and I think that's a really key question. I don't have time to deal with it further, but I think it's an opportunity to see that the direction of decision making integrates that the decisions on water with the related pressures that we're facing globally. So in view of the time, I'll stop there, but it's really important, I think, that robust governance is maintained in order to deal with the pressures on water from so many directions in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. It is very good to know how the GWP works from different angles by making massive networks, which actually functions as the governance for IWRM in various regions. Thank you for your sharing. Mr. Lacy, water management is an essential factor to achieve the SDG and to respond to climate crisis, which requires intergovernmental cooperation. In this regard, what is the policy direction of the OECD in water sector, and what are the facilitators for the cooperation between government to apply those policies?
Thank you very much for this question. Well, there are several ways the OECD contributes to global efforts to manage water in relation to the climate crisis. First, as an intergovernmental organization, the OECD works with and for governments. It's a country-driven organization. So we support national and global discussions through robust analysis and policy recommendations. The program of work I already mentioned on nature-based solutions for adapting the water-related climate risks is a good illustration. It is guiding country-specific work, for instance, in Hungary and Italy right now, and it also supported OECD contributions to G7 and G20 work on resilient infrastructure. Second, the OECD is a global standard setter. We identified good international practices and tease out policy-relevant messages to facilitate their diffusion. At the occasion of the World Water Day this year, the OECD Secretary General released the Toolkit for Water Policies and Governance. The toolkit complies policies, governance arrangements, and related tools to facilitate the design and implementation of water management practices in line with the OECD Council recommendation on water. It is designed to inspire and support countries which have adhered the OECD standards and are considering either adhering to or converging towards it. This work builds, all this work builds on a strong and constructive relationship with all our member states and partners on water, of which the Republic of Korea is a champion. I take the opportunity to commend the Korean government for its constant support for our work on water and related issues, and most recently for our ongoing collaboration in the 9 East Asian countries, including Thailand and Indonesia. Thank you very much indeed. This remarkable project supports the diffusion of tailored and sustainable water policies, governance, and technologies in these countries and in the region. The second Asia International Water Week, hosted by Indonesia later this year, will be an opportunity to really share more information, more experiences among us. So I look forward to it. Thank you very much again, Professor.
Well, thank you. Now, let me summarize the third topic. Good governance is indeed a very complex and long-term mission to achieve. However, every single step and effort we make from different public and private organizations, government, and international organizations based on shared vision will make our ways toward climate resilience with more voices from different ages, generations, sectors, and gender. The integrated system of water management that would facilitate climate action is only able to be built with a good governance. Thank you all for sharing your remarkable insight and experience again. For the Q&A session, we have 5 youth delegates here today who have already involved in the study or actions for disseminating the voices of the youth, emphasizing the value of water. I would like to introduce our 5 global youth delegates before we move on to the Q&A session. Ms. Lindsay Marie Aldaco Manor, former president of World Youth Parliament for Water. Ms. Karsima Asudani, the youth delegate of the World Water Council. Mr. Kei-hyun Lee, the youth delegate of the Korea Water Forum. Dr. Kevin Geronimo from Gongju National University, the vice chair of the Second Asia Pacific Youth Parliament for Water and the youth delegate of Korea Water Forum. Mr. Sung-hyun Kim, the winner of the Korea Junior Water Prize 2020. Please feel free to join us now. Youth delegate has 2 minutes each, either for comment or question. Firstly, Lindsay Manor, would you go ahead first?
Yes, thank you, moderator, and thank you to each for your excellent piece of advice. I wish I could ask you each a question, but unfortunately for time, I only have an opportunity for one, and this is to Howard. Given Mr. Magnasson's inspirational speech, he opened us up to thinking on time and water, specifically across time of generations. I loved thinking to a time when someone we loved will still be alive. With this, given the core value of exchanging knowledge and info across generations and sectors, for good water management, how can we improve good water management? And given your experience, are we actually involving enough exchange between generations? And where are we lacking, or how can we improve in this area?
Look, I think it's a really important question. How do we improve intergenerational engagement? In GWP, as you know, we've been attempting to. You were an observer in our board, and we've now created a full board position, not an observer position, for a youth representative. And already that is, I think, helping us focus more on the perspectives, the needs, and the stake that young people have in water decision making. I was struck, as you were, by Mr. Magnasson's comments about the reach that each of us has as an individual over time, and so I don't think there's any silver bullet for improving that intergenerational exchange and equity, but I think if we keep it in focus, if we understand that we haven't yet done enough, and that we've got to keep coming back to it as a reference point and a hurdle for the way we make decisions, then we can continue to improve. And if we do that, then we will see better decision making, and we will see greater equity in the decisions that we make.
Well, thank you.
Thank you,
Lindsay.
Howard. I like that focus on having the focus and view of intergenerational approach. Back to you, moderator.
Yeah, thank you, Lindsay and Mr. Bamsey. Now, who's next? Karasima?
All right, thank you, moderator, for that. Thank you, panelists. It's been a very informative and interesting session, I must say, and I truly agree upon the core message by today's panel discussion, which is significantly focused on key aspects of governance, policy, technology, resilience, and of course, water management. Well, my question is for Mr. Lacey. The World Water Council's advocacy is water as politics, and water and carbon neutrality are two important subjects that if we talk about, impact policy at global level. While good governance is one part of it, there is maybe lack of youth advocacy as agents of change, which are seen in these matters of priority. I'd like to ask you, Mr. Lacey, that I'd like your comment on how youth can be instrumental in these global discussions through governance spectrum.
Mr. Lacey?
Well, thank you very much for the question. No, it is true that there are many environmental processes in the planet that don't have governance structures or governance framework at the international level. Water is also the case, but there are specific water ecosystems like the ocean that are having governance problems. This is an issue when we talk about, of course, global climate transformations, where the ocean is a key element of the planet that is, of course, changing and is affecting our economic activities. So the OECD is trying to address these specific issues of governance of different environments, of different ecosystems, of different thematic problems in the environment domain to, of course, have with the OECD countries a common response and enhance, of course, the international dialogue to solve these problems. So I can answer that the governance issues are not only related with environmental topics, of course. Many of the discussions that are happening on climate and water are related with energy. So we need also some energy governance internationally, and also the OECD family, the International Agency of Energy is doing their work. And I think that with the International Transportation Forum and the Nuclear Energy Agency, we are contributing to that governance that we need.
Well, thank you, Kasima, for your question, and thank you, Mr. Lacey, for answering. It's hard to answer short to the next generation's questions, but we are running short of time, so maybe we can shorten the question and answer next from now on. Who's next, Mr. Kei-Han Lee?
Thank you very much, moderator. I'm very honored to take part in this wonderful discussion, and I really appreciate this great opportunity for me to participate in this session. And I would like to ask a question to Mr. Howard Bamsey, the chair of Global Water Partnership. First of all, my research area is urban, water, and disaster. And one of my main research topics is the environmental justice. And when it comes to water management and climate resilience, I have recognized that the technological and physical sector has been mainstream compared to the social sector, especially environmental justice. For instance, if we read the water security assessment frameworks, which is currently well known, we can notice that physical index accounts for a majority of the proportion compared to the social index. And I can see that the importance of environmental justice is gaining its attention recently. However, I think there are still many things be done to make environmental justice mainstream in the water sector. So the question is, what can be the role of international organization, NGO, and government to enhance the necessity and importance of environmental justice within water management and climate resilience? Thank you.
Thanks very much for the question. It's a really timely one. I think one thing that most of us would agree, one characteristic of the way, if we can call it the water sector, handles the issue is that it's highly fragmented, that there are all sorts of organisations of different types dealing with water, and that unlike some other very important questions like, say, climate change or biodiversity that Roberto mentioned, the COP a minute ago, unlike those, there is no global treaty or compact on water that brings everyone together. And what that means, I think, is that mainstreaming change, bringing new issues onto the agenda, is much more difficult because there's no one point of entry. There are so many. And I think environmental justice is a relatively new concept, and it will take time before it climbs the ladder, as it were, to real salience in this fragmented sector. There's probably a long answer, but a short answer to the best way of moving the issue, I think, is to rely on robust governance and integrated water resource management, so that we don't take decisions about water that are only technological or that are only financial, but that we recognise that when we make a decision about water, we affect all of the stakeholders on the resource, and that they all have to be included. That's fundamentally recognising the importance of environmental justice, I think. And so I think that's the best tool that we can use in this highly fragmented sector to move that question forward.
Well, thank you, Kehan, for bringing up the environment justice issue. And thank you, Mr. Bemsi, for expressing your view. Now, I'll be pleased to have Kevin. Kevin?
Yeah. Hello, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much, Professor Cha, and to all of our honorable panelists. I really appreciate your effort and valuable insights for our environment. The Asia-Pacific Youth Parliament for Water is composed of youth representatives from both developing and developed countries. However, as we know, the impacts of climate change are more noticeable in developing countries due to their lack of climate-resilient programs. While the technologies discussed earlier were applicable to developing countries, what could be your suggestions and message to the developing countries considering climate change resiliency programs and carbon neutral water management technologies? Could you please answer Ms. Anna Hiros from SWES? Thank you very much.
Anna?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. In fact, it's a very, very wide question, and I will try to maybe focus on one topic that for me, it's very relevant, especially in emerging countries where infrastructure is not yet there, and everything that is networks are really to be reshaped and digitalized. So I would focus maybe on the PPP, so the powerful public and private partnership. I think it was Ms. Sarah that from the World Bank that said there is a huge underinvestment in the water sector, and one of the ways of putting all this together is working private and public sector to try to build projects that make sense, that bring really value to the communities, that afterwards on the CapEx side, private money can be invested instead of mobilizing public funds that are needed for something else, and then afterwards to create the right environment for to make those projects work and bankable and affordable. So at the end of the day, we face ourselves as Suez with many beauty projects in Mexico, in Jordan, in Southeast Asia that work really well, and it's a really win-win association. I would only quote a few things that need to be very in mind, because we also have some examples that didn't work well, but it's clear that security of payment, regulatory frameworks, and this is where IFIS and people like OECD have a major role to play to advise the governments. So regulatory frameworks, risk allocation between what can be allocated to the private, but also has to be borne like tariff management and things like that are from more on the public side and should be really well structured. And at the end of the day, the contract evolution and how do we foresee this? Because normally PPPs are for 20, 25, 30 years. And it's important to take this time evolution in the mindset of creating and developing those projects. But this is something that can be put, of course, all technology is applicable in emerging markets, but way to structure it and to finance it, for me, it's key.
Well, thank you, Kevin and Ms. Hiros. Our last question goes to Mr. Seungyeon Kim.
Thank you, moderator, and thank you all panelists for your excellent speeches. And I have a question for Mrs. Meena Sankaran, CEO of Kedos. I'm currently developing an educational app based on the water footprint concept to show the public the amount of water that they can save potentially by making small changes to their lifestyles. And I presented my research result last year at Korea's Water Prize. Although I just graduated high school, I'm willing to take part in resolving the global climate and water problems. And I want to know what kind of role that our peer students can take when facing these environmental issues.
Kim, thank you for that question. I think youth is going to play an absolute pivotal role, and how you engage with all of your fellow youth is going to be paramount. I think doing an educational app is a fantastic idea, even if you're just graduating high school, and to have I applaud you for being as present and aware as you are in terms of sort of nurturing that idea. One of the first things I would say is, leverage that opportunity to extend the information of that educational app within your community as a start. Then your businesses within the community, whether it's restaurants, whether it's small food hubs, everything. Because you've always heard about people drinking a glass of water but leaving a half a glass of water a lot of times in the restaurant. It starts almost down to that one half a glass of water. Every drop counts. And so when you're putting an educational app together, there's so many ways of encouraging, from a small business owner to how people use their water at home, to how people use their water in their lawn. So I think, or even your own school, as well as across the educational system. So I think there's a ton of opportunity for you to do this in parallel and really create a movement. And it's beyond just an entrepreneurship of a small company or a small product, because you can potentially make this app a movement within Korea of how you engage community to make water a priority. And I think this is a great opportunity for you to, because ultimately you're competing with people's headspace when it comes to apps. Everyone has about 100 apps on their phone. So making this water app stand out, making it really creative, making it interactive, even gamifying your app, because that's how the new youth is going to really get encouraged and interactive with you. So there's tons of ideas to explore, and I think you're absolutely on a remarkable journey ahead.
Thank you, Ms. Songkran, for your wonderful answer and advice. And I'll hand over my back to the moderator. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Seungyeon, and thank you, Karen, for your good question and answer. Now we finally at the end of our session today. We have made our discussion very seriously and intensively We discussed how the development and innovation of technologies and policies make a difference and how the governance works as the essence of making triangular mechanism of those three pillars. To express our willingness to disseminate these messages to the global water community, please everyone use the sign language water. I will say green we go, and everyone goes with the change we make by making water sign language with your finger. Ready? Green we go, change we make.
2021 P4G Seoul Summit, Call for Action, titled as the Carbon Neutral Smart Water Management for Climate Resilience. Hereby, the participants of the 2021 P4G thematic water session formulate the following recommendations. Seoul, Republic of Korea, May 31st, 2021. Thank you very much, Mr. Cha, for your great moderation and insight shared. And on behalf of the host, we truly appreciate all the panelists for your valuable input. And next, we'll continue to P4G Hub session. Then I'll hand over the mic to Mr. Chair and proceed with the Hub session. Mr. Chair, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Cha, and welcome everyone to the P4G session on water. My name is Carla Vrivamuthi, and I'm the Executive Director of the International Water Association, and I really appreciate the opportunity to help with this very important event. We have an esteemed group of speakers participating in today's discussions, and I have no doubt that they will share with us details of what are the best-in-class partnerships and highlight the importance of P4G in helping them establish them. When we think about water, I believe that it's in the developing countries where we will see the greatest innovation and the greatest speed in terms of uptake. You see, most of us recognize that the way we've been doing our water business in the past is not really suitable or adequate, especially in response to some of the global change pressures that we're facing. We do need a paradigm shift. And what I can see is that in developing countries, they're in this fortunate position where they don't have a lot of legacy infrastructure in place, and hence they have this window of opportunity to reimagine how they go about their water business. And they're really doing that precisely in a way through innovation. You're seeing great thinking and innovation emerging both in South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. And into this space, you see this growing array of market-based approaches that can really help spark a transformation. And I feel personally quite confident that it will be the developing countries that establish this new paradigm in terms of water management. And this will create the imperative for change in developed countries, as the developed countries will see some of the benefits of these practices, and they will see that, you know, that is the way the way in which to move. So I think it's critical that we put the voice of developing countries at the heart of our discussions on innovation and the new thinking in relation to water management. And I hope that this session in some ways tries to talk to this. I would now like to kick off this session with a brief video that shares an overview of P4G's work in improving water resilience and the innovative market-based solutions that it is scaling. So please, if we could see the video.
Digitalization is having a major impact on the water sector. It provides developing countries with long-term solutions to integrate resilience into their water infrastructure, while improving access to clean water and sanitation in the short to medium term.
Over 2 billion people live in countries experiencing water stress. We have an opportunity to halt an escalating global water crisis and spark a paradigm shift in water and sanitation access so that all people can thrive. From financial technology to smart solutions for meters, P4G partnerships are taking bold, digital-first approaches to enhance water security. The Finance for Wash partnership is designing a multi-million-dollar lending facility to improve water and sanitation solutions for retailers and households in Kenya. Other P4G partnerships, like IW+, are providing pay-as-you-go options to increase affordable access to clean water from utilities.
To fundamentally reshape the water sector, we not only need the right solutions, but we also need the right combination of actors to implement these solutions. P4G brings together a robust civil society to address community needs, industry to redesign models that embrace regenerative approaches, and investors to finance and scale solutions for the development of a global water market.
P4G is a global platform delivering transformative impact with a pipeline of more than 50 partnerships and a global ecosystem spanning 12 country partners, 5 organizational partners, and more than 240 business and civil society partners. Join us in pioneering green partnerships and investing in impact.
Okay, thank you. That was a great video. And what we'd like to now do is to move to our 3 short keynotes. As I said earlier, we have 3 very eminent speakers here today, and I'd like to first introduce all of them. First, we will kick off with Minister Shahira Alam, who is the State Minister for Foreign Affairs in Bangladesh. That will be followed by Pia Yasuko Rask, who is Safe Water Senior Director at Grundfos. And then we will have a presentation from Karin Finkelstein, Vice President of Partnerships, Communications and Outreach at the IFC. And I really would like these speakers to respond to some of the earlier comments that I made, to share their vision for market-based solutions in water, particularly with relation to developing countries, and also to share with us how they are improving water systems and resilience, and how the P4G has helped them scale their vision. So to start, I would like to kick off with Minister Shahira Alam. Please, Minister, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Kala, the moderator in this session, distinguished other speakers, ladies and gentlemen. A very good day to you all from Dhaka. I congratulate the Republic of Korea for arranging this second P4G summit amid this trying time of COVID-19 pandemic. I'm happy to join this thematic session on a very important topic, water, organized to identify innovative solutions for improved access to clean water and sanitation in the developing countries that have been impacted adversely due to climate change. Bangladesh is one of the most climate vulnerable countries. Each year, Bangladesh is losing 2% of its GDP due to extreme climate events. Moreover, we are burdened with nearly 1 million forcibly evicted Rohingyas from Myanmar that has created a severe environmental problem for us. Despite having resource constraints, Bangladesh is the first LDC to establish a climate change trust fund and has spent over $415 million from its own resources to implement over 800 mitigation and adaptation programs till date. We are now regarded as a global leader in climate adaptation. We have assumed the presidency of 48-nation Climate Vulnerable Forum, known as CVF, in 2020, under the visionary leadership of Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. We are spending on an average $5 billion, equivalent to 2.5% of our GDP each year in climate adaptation and resilience building. Amidst all these provisions of water bodies and tree plantations are ensured throughout. To give you an example, we have ongoing water infrastructure augmenting initiatives like Barind Multi-Purpose Development Project, in short BMDP, allotted with nearly $5 million last year, that looks into irrigation in North Bengal, where I am from, known as Rice Bowl of Bangladesh. But this has been concentrated on groundwater mostly till date. Hence, due to government's initiative and increased focus on sustainable and commercially conducive smart water usage, steps are being taken for transferring these projects' concentration to central Bangladesh, where natural water is a little more widely available due to higher rainfall in central Bangladesh as opposed to the north of Bangladesh. Therefore, recognizing the whole multidimensionality of water management, ecology, and livelihood, Bangladesh has adopted the Delta Plan 2100, which is a unique 100-year master plan that encapsulates the whole spectrum of water management, ecology, and livelihood. Ladies and gentlemen, as an active partner of P4G, Bangladesh has already developed nodes of partnership in 5 P4G focus areas. For instance, financial inclusion improves sanitation and health, in short, Finish Mondial. Sustainable future for textile factories, again, to encourage manufacturer to use lesser volume of water. Then, of course, mostly for drinking, clean water for all. These are manifestation of how Bangladesh is promoting the whole of society approach in dealing with the multidimensional gamut of water and sanitation. We recognize the dual need of ensuring both access to and quality of this crucial natural resource, and are bringing policies and business solutions throughout the country in delivering both. Ladies and gentlemen, Bangladesh believes that innovation and technological advancement can play a pivotal role in addressing the ongoing challenges of water resource management. The global community should bring together policy, research, finance, and technology in a concerted way to achieve the target of ensuring water and sanitation for all. Through our collective engagements and partnership, we can mitigate the impacts of climate change. I'm confident that ahead of COP26, today's discussion will bring effective solution to this end. I thank you all.
Thank you very much, Minister Alam, for your wise words. And I think some of your partners are actually involved in the panel discussion, so we'll hear more from them later. But thanks again, Minister. I would like to now move to Pierre Rusk from Grundfos. Please, Pierre.
Thank you very much, Carla. Thank you, Honourable Minister of Environment, our host, P4G. And of course, thank you, Honourable Mr. Alam, for those insightful reflections. It's always humbling and inspiring. I'm joining you today from our factory museum at our headquarters, and behind me is a machine from 1972 that's actually still in use some places, despite the technological advances that we see also in manufacturing. But I do want to tell you a different story today. When my 8-year-old son, who I see too little because I work too much, in his school assignment draws a picture of his mom, and it shows a face with very big glasses, a drop of water, the earth, and a big heart. That is something. When my 10-year-old refuses to use the palm oil butter that I just bought because it's not sustainably sourced, that is something. When both my sons look at me as if I'm from the moon, when I tell them that women and men do not have equal rights everywhere, that is something. And it's something because we are nurturing the future triggers of change that can actually transform a society. History, however, does not always wait for the next generation. There are other triggers of change. With COVID, we're in the middle of one. Grundfos was established in 1945 when Paul Du Jensen, our founder, he built a pump in his basement. The trigger was rebuilding after a war and a neighbor in need of water. Our first solar pump came in the early 1980s. Madness is what most people thought. It was not the business case that carried that decision 50 years ago. The triggers of change, oil crisis, and boldness. So I ask myself, what triggers do we need to finally get water to everyone, everywhere? How do we speed up that journey from aid to trade, from grant to growth, and also from beneficiary to a customer with choices? How do we build that bridge to trigger transformation so we don't have to wait for our children to solve a problem, which we actually together have all the components to solve together today? I think water is a problem of complexity, and we want people to have sustainable technology choices. But it's not the obvious business case that carried us here. So only together, across sectors and geographies, can we actually build this bridge. And I feel very, very lucky to be exactly here, because we want this responsibility. We have a true and real opportunity to trigger and transform water if we sort out how to partner and actually how to build together. And that is why partnerships for growth, that is why P4G are so important right now. We need room to experiment, to co-create, to innovate as we explore, these edges of what's commercially viable. So I am really proud that Grundfos partners with P4G, but I also hope that P4G will become obsolete in my lifetime, because I think that will be our greatest joint success. So let's turn madness into magic. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Pierre, for those inspiring words. I'm sure everyone was very touched, and it was fantastic. Thank you very much, Pierre, for that. I'd like to now move to Karine Finkelstein, the Vice President of Partnerships and Communications at IFC.
It's wonderful to join you today on behalf of IFC, and many thanks to P4G for this invitation. When we cross the finish line to each Sustainable Development Goal, we'll be marching toward a more prosperous and equitable world. But delivering on clean water will have a uniquely transformational impact. And that is why the work we're continuing today is so important. 785 million people around the world lack access to safe water. That's nearly 1 out of every 8 people. This situation is causing serious public health concerns, particularly in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. It's also causing significant environmental challenges. Now more than ever, expanded access to safe water, sanitation, and related municipal infrastructure is critically important. The cost and complexity of these projects require that we pursue innovative, market-oriented, and long-term solutions. To reach our goals, we need to change the way we operate. In the water sector, which is still heavily reliant on public sector delivery, we must find new ways to bring in private sector solutions. IFC's 3.0 strategy aims to do exactly that by engaging earlier than traditional financiers to create new markets for the private sector. We call this working upstream. Over the past 10 years, IFC's made $1.4 billion worth of water-related investments in emerging markets. And now, with IFC 3.0, we're working to increase the role of the private sector in addressing pressing climate challenges. In concrete terms, this means providing advisory services on climate change adaptation together with commercial financing to subnational water utilities. Our Utilities for Climate initiative works with publicly held water companies in Turkey and Brazil on issues such as non-revenue water, energy efficiency, and resilience. This work complements the World Bank's Utilities for the Future initiative, which supports utilities reform efforts. And we also see opportunities to expand such initiatives to private utilities, albeit they represent a much smaller universe. We're also using a plug-and-play set of bankable contracts to establish PPPs for treating and recycling sewage and transforming wastewater for industrial and agricultural use. As you know, the task is great, and none of us can tackle this challenge alone. Partnerships are the key. And this is why alignment and coordination with P4G and others is essential. We look forward to scaling up such collaboration and continuing to work with you to find solutions to these protracted challenges.
Thank you very much, Karine, and great to see that IFC is really helping, supporting countries to transition to sort of a more sustainable approach to water management. I think we had 3 very excellent keynote speakers, and I would like to thank them again for their wonderful contributions. It really sets the scene now for our panel discussion. And, we are a bit short of time, so I'm going to move straight into the panel discussions. I'd like to first introduce the 4 panelists that we have with us. We have Vidika Bandarka, who's the Chief Global Impact Officer for Water.org. We have Yosin Sluz, who's the Managing Director for Aqua for All. We have Valentin Post, who is the CEO of Finnish Mondale, and Robert Bunny, who is CEO of Kenya Pooled Water Fund. Hello to all of you, and thank you for being on the panel. I'd like to ask all of you the first question, and the question is really around the fact that, in order to meet the challenges of the water sector, we need solutions that can be used at scale. which means first finding and defining those solutions, and then structuring them in a way that attracts high levels of investment and needed to achieve that scale. So what I'd like to ask each of you to respond to is, can you just comment on your work? And what have you done? How is that work either being done in terms of finding or scaling up the solutions? And also, how are you unlocking investment for some of this transformative change in the water sector? And also to talk a little bit about the specific gaps that you feel there are in the investor marketplace for the solutions that you are trying to address. So I'd put that question to all of you, but I would ask Vedika to kick off in responding to that. Please, Vedika.
Sure, thanks, Kala, and thanks P4G for having me here. So as you probably know, water.org works with financial institutions and helps them, provides them technical help, capacity building help, so that they start making loans to households which are at the base of the economic pyramid to enable them to get access to safe water and sanitation. So our financial partners across the world have so far made roughly 8 million loans, which is equal to about $3 billion in domestic private capital to enable 36 million people get access to safe water and sanitation. But Karen just talked about the need, and the need is much, much larger. So how can we continue to scale this? So one of the initiatives which we have been working with IFC is how can we get domestic banks, large commercial banks, to start making loans to both households as well as small enterprises for meeting their water and sanitation needs. And the solution we're working with IFC, which we're calling Global Credit Enhancement Facility, is providing partial credit guarantees to these banks for a limited period of time. Unfortunately, COVID's put a big spanner in terms of timelines, but we're hoping to start the India leg of the project this year. And with the banks in India, we are hoping that about 3.5 million people will get access to safe water and sanitation over the next 3 years. And almost $250 million of capital will be catalyzed over the next 3 years. I also wanted to give a couple of quick examples, linking climate and climate resilient access. So in Indonesia, we've been working with utilities, the urban utilities. So these are city and district utilities called the PDAMs. And again, we're helping them expand their network so that they're able to reach people living in poverty. So the minute somebody gets access is linked to a water utility, by the very definition, they're getting much more climate resilient access. But we don't stop there. We continue to work with these utilities and help them reduce their non-revenue water, help them get much more efficient in terms of energy efficiency. Again, having a very good impact in terms of reducing the energy consumption and hence reducing the greenhouse emissions. And my last quick example is rainwater harvesting, and that's from Mexico. So we're working with an organization called Isla Urbana and a financial partner called Contigo in Mexico City to enable, that there is huge water shortage there. So can households get rainwater harvesting structures? Can they get financing for these rainwater harvesting structures? Again, increasing and enabling access to climate resilient safe water access. Thanks, Kala.
Thank you very much, Vedika, for responding to the question quite directly and with some very, very good examples. Thank you for that, and congratulations for the work that the water.org is doing. I'd like to now ask Yusin to also respond to the question that I posed at the beginning. Yusin.
Thank you so much, Kala, for this opportunity, and I'm very glad to be here. Responding to the questions that you posed, I think when I started to work for a bank long time ago, I saw the transformative power of access to capital. And later on, I worked with a Dutch impact investor to put on the agenda more socially oriented topics. And then I was asked by Aqua for All to step in as their managing director to make sure that the connection with the impact investors was made. And the reason why I very much appreciated this is because, you know, we have very, very limited public funding available for the sector. We need at least 20-fold on an annual basis. So my dedication towards this is to make sure that all the grant funding that we have available has a huge catalytic effect. And this is the reason why we gladly work with water.org and all their efforts to get private capital into the market. And there are other examples that we are working on as well. So we're partner of the Finnish Mondial Group, also promoting the construction of toilets, which Valentin will explain a little bit more on. But what we do specifically is also to work with enterprises along the scaling pathway. Because, you know, it's not only financial institutions that could push financial services into the market, we also need to create a pipeline for investors to invest in. And that at the very current moment is very, very limited. So what we're doing is we're working with enterprises and design blended facilities for them. We provide them, for example, with incentive payments to go the extra mile, to reach out to more remote areas, and then prepare those areas as an interesting client base for them, so that after the incentive payments, they indeed are able to break even and become investment ready. So we have a whole set of these kind of blended facilities and programs that we work on to make sure that impact investors, once they progress in their work, and that's not only what water.org do, but also the impact investors such as Incofin and Triple Jump are really putting in an effort to set up funds either for equity or debt or a combined version of it, to see to what extent we can push investments in water operators. And that is not only, you know, the big utilities, because they quite often have access to funding from organizations such as World Bank, but mostly the ones that operate just below that, the enterprises that provide water and sanitation to a large part of the community that do not have access to this kind of capital. And I think there's a huge possibility out there. And it was highlighted that we need to start thinking differently, and I very much resonated. And so that, for example, building up one of the programs supported by P4G in Bangladesh, and that was in the garment industry, is something that triggered me. And so I reached out to one of the impact investors and I said, like, you know, why don't we build up on that possibility and bring in an investor as project developer, co-finance it through grants to make sure that the garment industry does not dissolve all the chemical waste into the river. That is now also one of the areas that Bangladesh is going to build a big plant as their intake for Dhaka Wasa. So these kind of solutions, I think, are extremely important to work on. So I stop here because otherwise I continue to speak too long, but I very much appreciate the opportunity to highlight and emphasize all the work that everyone is doing in this field. I think jointly we can achieve a lot.
Thank you very much, Yassine. It's great that you're doing so much work with impact investors, and I know that it can be sometimes quite difficult for us in terms of trying to demonstrate the impacts of some of the investments, particularly in terms of attribution. So congratulations for Aqua for being quite successful in that direction. I'd like to now put the same question to Valentin of Finnish Mondial. Valentin?
Thanks, Kala, and thanks P4G, Republic of Korea, and of course, thanks to Minister Alam also for mentioning that we already have started in Bangladesh. So yeah, let's say the problem out there is massive. So we talk about 4.5 billion people without access to safe sanitation, and that is huge. So what do? We start really with creating awareness and demand, and we do that together with governments, with local civil society. And then a unique feature is we work with local entrepreneurs, masons, small businesses, develop their skills, their business capacity to actually start delivering. Then thirdly, it's linked to microfinance or other financial institutions who can provide the mostly poor clients with access to money to start constructing and building. Then lastly, it's again coming back to the institutionalization, because this is something you can start with, you can do, but you would like to get it institutionalized. So a lot of the training, the capacity development, the awareness creation is part of an institutional setting where typically governments take a big role. And to give an example, we are institutionalizing the trainings we do for sanitation system construction in Uganda. We're doing it in Kenya, and we're trying to make this national standards. So over the years, we've done 1.2 million sanitation systems, about a value of about $240 million, or slightly higher. And this has attracted a different kind of investor. It's an impact investor, one based out in the Netherlands. And for the first time that I recall, that Dutch institutional money is going into the sector, into household sanitation in developing countries. And it's a commercial undertaking in which they are launching a series of funds valued at $300 million. The first of the funds of $60 million will be launched by the end of this year. What does it mean in practical terms? In practical terms is that we do a due diligence together on the MFI partners, on the microfinance partners. We need to develop a pipeline, and they need to tie it together. And it's a really small world, because the lady who's sitting next to me, Josine, is also involved in this. I think P4G has been instrumental in it, and water.org, I'm sure they, if it's not in the first one, in the second one, we'll find them again. So it's something where you have to work together. This is, I think, the essential message from everyone, from Minister Alam to everyone is saying the same thing. This is something we have to do together. And that's really, I think, where P4G places a critical and pivotal role. So yeah, I would say continue the work. And I agree, let's make ourselves at one point in time redundant. Thank you.
Thank you, Valentin, for your inspirational words. And yeah, we fully agree, you know, it's all about partnerships, and one does need a platform like P4G to sort of facilitate that. So again, congratulations for the work that you're doing. Robert, CEO of Kenya Pool Water Fund, please.
Thank you very much, Minister Alam, P4G, session chair, and everybody present. What is Kenya Pool Water Fund? It's actually not a fund. Think of us as a financial arranger. And what's the problem we are looking to solve? The problem out here in Kenya is that the government made an estimate back in 2018 that there's a requirement, an investment requirement in the water sector of 100 billion shillings, $1 billion annually from 2018 through to 2030 to achieve universal access to water and sanitation. That funding estimate, demand estimate, the government estimated that itself could raise a maximum of 40% annually, maximum. That left an obvious gap of $600 million annually over that 12-year period. So the idea between the Kenya Pool Water Fund is to source local capital. So we have got a well-developed pension fund industry. They have got no experience in investing in the water sector in any form. And they've got no exposure to the water sector. And we are funded by the Dutch government. And the idea is to pool loans to the from the water companies, to write corporate loans to the water companies, pool them into a basket, and sell that basket on the local stock exchange as a long-term bond. It solves two immediate problems for the water companies. It gives them long-term capital, which currently the local financial system does not provide them. And it gives them what is unique at this point in time in Kenya's development, and the ability to directly invest themselves, because typically the investments are made by the central government. Now, when you give this kind of power to the water companies, we end up with local decision-making, local solutions, and therefore that's where the sustainability starts. I don't want to exceed that point. I've got a lot to tell you. Maybe I pass it on back.
Thank you very much, Robert. And it seems really interesting and very inspiring what's going on there in Kenya with the pooled fund. And thank you for explaining how it works. I'm conscious of the time, and what I'd like to do is, in 30 seconds, I would like to ask each of the panelists to really, and I think you all touched upon it in your responses, but really to share with us your thoughts how important and the role of a platform like P4G is in terms of trying to help you scale. And I think I'll kick off with Vedika again. Vedika?
Sure, thanks, Kala. So I think this point was made by everybody, but just quickly, I think a platform like P4G is extremely necessary to bring all the actors together, right? So again, talking concretely about two examples, P4G and Aqua for All are helping us take the Global Credit Enhancement Facility to markets other than India. So we're going to Kenya. Robert, we're coming to your country for the Global Credit Enhancement Facility, thanks to P4G and Aqua for All. Second quick example I wanted to make was Water Equity, our sister organization. So they are an investment manager, first asset manager, I think, to exclusively focus on access to water and sanitation, enabling access to water and sanitation for those living in poverty. They now have assets under management or committed capital of just under $200 million, so $176 million. And they're, from what they've already invested, 1.8 million people have got access to safe water and sanitation. Again, a platform like P4G can shine a light on investment managers like Water Equity, help them expand, but also bring in other investment managers because the need is so much larger and it can't be fulfilled by just one. Thanks, Kala.
Thanks very much for that, Vedika. Joshi?
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's in my opinion, another valuable asset to P4G is the fact that, of course, you also feed back to your funders again. And I think that also on that level, it's extremely important that the knowledge is shared so that it can be transformed into policy making again. And that is something that that we value also very much. And of course, it gives you a huge platform to showcase whatever we do and what we strongly feel that is needed. So thank you very much and looking forward to do a lot more.
Thank you, Yassine, for that. And Valentin, I mean, you mentioned a lot about the importance of P4G already, but I don't know if there's anything more you want to add, Valentin.
Yeah, just quickly then. Thanks, Carla. I think the case for investing, that's clear. And I think that's P4G is very well suited to do that. Then from our personal interest, I would say, and of course, that's a wider interest, replicability to other countries. So currently we're focusing on 6 and there may be others. And lastly, we are working on the sanitation circular economy, and that requires new type of partners. Tell me anything about agriculture, I believe you. If you tell me anything about we are not experts in those areas, and we need partners like coming to the P4G network to help us scale on these areas as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Valentin. And Robert, I'm going to give you the last word, please, Robert.
Okay, thank you very much. From my point of view, I think one of the biggest challenges we all have is to scale up the demand side. The water users, the water companies, we need to equip them to understand all the technological solutions, the financial solutions, the management services solutions, etc., that are available out there. And we have to look for a way to get these guys to be more proactive in acting as a pool rather than we being the push with the ideas. So how do we get the demand boosted? And I suppose that's more of a question than a comment. I don't know the answer myself, but we have to find a solution.
Yeah. That's a great point, Robert. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm sure that will be food for another panel discussion at some stage. Unfortunately, we are running against time. So I just want to thank all of the panelists for participating in such an engaging panel discussion. It was very engaging and inspiring. And with that, I'd like to now hand over to Robin, who will give some closing remarks. Robin? Yeah.
I was having some computer issues. Thank you, Kala, and all of our esteemed panelists and guests. It's wonderful to see you here today. And special thanks to our host for this Seoul Summit, the government of Korea. We've heard of extraordinary advancements and commitments today in our collective journey for a sustainable water sector. Minister Alam spoke of the climate change challenges faced by Bangladesh, the creation of the Climate Trust Fund, and the $5 billion spent annually on climate adaptation and resilience building, representing over 2% of the country's GDP. These are the kinds of challenges we need to be working collectively to address. Pia from Grundfos talked about triggers of change and Grundfos's bold launch of businesses to mainstream their products and services to the most vulnerable populations in the developing world, from the wonderful catchphrases from aid to trade and from grant to growth. And the important work that each of you, our panelists, IFC, Water.org, Finnish Mondial, Aqua for All, and Kenya Pooled Water Fund talked about represent the kind of tangible action that is needed by each of us individually as organizations, and that is importantly collectively bridging the gap between those grant-based models focused on aid to the growth-based models focused on enterprise. Enterprises that are providing investable and scalable water solutions as sustainable business models for communities in need. This is the real systems change on the ground and at a global scale that is needed to accomplish SDG 6 and to meet the challenges of climate change. And here at P4G, we are at the core of building a greater ecosystem for that growth and transformation. And we're pleased to hear about several of the cross-fertilization opportunities realized through our partnerships and through our network. We together are collectively creating a new rhetoric of systems change through concrete action on the ground, action which can scale in the appropriate level of finance that is needed in order to meet our goals. This Seoul Summit is a stepping stone to COP26, and I ask each of you as a next step to continue to push these models forward as real ground-up solutions that must be both understood and adopted at a global level in order for us to meet our collective goals. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Robin, for your summary of the key takeaways for the session. They were all spot on, so there's really nothing more I can really add to such a wonderful summary. So actually, I think it's time now for me to just close by thanking again all the speakers and the panelists, and thanks to all of you who've been listening. We hope you found the session very informative. I know I did. I learned a lot from all of you, so thank you for that. I'd like to now hand over back to Ms. Kim. I'm handing back to you to close out the water session. Thank you very much. Goodbye, everyone.
Thanks to the heated presentation and discussion. The discussion made me lose all track of time. Thank you once again. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of all programs of the 2021 P4G Seoul Summit Thematic Water Session. I'm most certain that we all have had a productive and rewarding time together in the past 2.5 hours, and our gathering will be used as a rock-hard foundation to continue our missions. Thank you very much for your time with us today. Thank you.